I'd like to call to order our Utilities Committee meeting for November 12th, 2019. Madam Secretary, let the record show that all members of this committee are present, exclusive of Mr. Benny Johnson. And we're delighted to have, of course, Councilwoman Casso, our council chair, sitting with us this evening. Also, point of order, before we have the invocation in prayer, I'd like to recognize various members here that have been recently elected to the council in the parish presidency. So if you guys want to raise your hand or stand up, you feel free to do that. We have Mr. Chase Melanson, I see in the audience, Mr. Michael Mason, Mr. Corey Ogeron. Is that it on the council? And Mr. Clint.
Back?
Mr. Dow Wagaspack. Welcome, gentlemen. Glad to have you all here tonight. And Parish President Clint Quintmore. All right, and so with that, our invocation night will be led by Mr. Ogeron. Please remain standing after he finishes for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good evening, everyone. Please prepare yourself for prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you for the abundance that you provide to us, the great community, the wonderful people, and the respected servants that we have here before us today. Lord, present upon us your wisdom and your knowledge and your kindness so that we work together for the betterment of the people of Ascension Parish. In the name of Jesus Christ, I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is starting to get to be a worn-out joke, but to welcome everyone. We have a very robust audience this evening, but the joke is they're giving away S&H green stamps. By telling it over and over, I guess the chair just shows his age. Anyway, with that, the next item on our agenda is the chair's addition. There will be none this evening. We have a rather lengthy agenda, so I don't think we need that. There will be public comment period, item number 4. So if you haven't done so already and you wish to speak on any of the agenda items tonight, at this point 17, but we're going to have an addition in a minute if the committee approves, so 18 items. You can speak on any one of them by filling out either a green or a red card. And at the point in time of the item, I'll call you up here. Please bring it up to the secretary up here, and you'll be given 3 minutes to speak on that item. Okay. Before doing item number 5, we'd like to ask the committee if they're willing to add. Mr. Daniel has asked me, and we'll be adding this as item number 17. You have been given a draft of a contribution and conveyance agreement, an act to transfer. You have that, OJ? To transfer property by and between Ascension Wastewater Treatment Incorporated and Ascension Consolidated Utilities District Number 2, which is not on your agenda, but we'd like to add it as item number 17. The chair will entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
A three-way tie here. Well, I guess we'll give to Bill Dawson, the second to Aaron Lawler. Any discussion? Any objections?
You got to take a roll.
Oh, we got to do that by roll call. Sorry. Madam Secretary? Yes.
Vice Chairman Oliver Joseph.
Yes.
Councilman Bill Dawson.
Yes.
Councilman Aaron Lawler.
Yes.
And Councilwoman Terry Casso.
Yes.
Okay, so we will add that item as number 17. Is that what I said? Yes. Okay. So item number 5 is the approval of the minutes from October 8th, 2019 meeting. Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Oliver Joseph, second by Terry Casso to approve the minutes. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, those minutes are approved. Item number 6, okay. Computer's taking a little while to load here this evening, is acceptance of low bids for the CWEF grant 2015-2016, number 200244356, CWEF ground storage electrical upgrades. Ms. Shivers.
On October 15, 2019, the Purchasing Department received one bid for the ground storage electrical upgrades. After review, the Parish Utilities Department and ADG Engineering recommend accepting the lowest responsive bid submitted by Ernest P. Bro Electrical and to authorize the parish president to enter into any applicable agreement or contract for this project. The budget is $120,000, and the low bid, base bid came in at $105,000.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Joseph, second by Ms. Casso to approve. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, item 7 is approved. Item number 8 is, pardon me, that was item number 6. Item number 7 is the approval of professional engineering services for emergency generator grant 1786-022-002 wastewater HMGP generators. Again, Ms. Shivers.
On November 5th, 2019, the Parish Utilities Department received a proposal from Craig Abear Engineering, LLC, to provide electrical engineering services to support the installation of stationary emergency generators, fuel storage tanks, and automatic transfer switches for various locations. After review by the Utilities Department, it is their recommendation to seek your approval and to authorize the parish president to enter into any applicable agreement or contract for this service not to exceed $49,900.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Dawson, a second by Councilman Joseph to approve the scope and work of Craig Abear. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion is approved. Item number 8 is our monthly director's report. Are you going to do that tonight, Gavin?
Yes, sir, Councilman.
Okay.
Good evening, Council. The director's report will be fairly brief. Since we're under a freeze warning, we've sent out notices warning the residents of Donaldsonville and Ascension Parish of the impending freeze and making sure that if they have their water on, make sure it's a slow trickle and wrapping all exterior pipes. We're also we're having our crews go around throughout the night to check for leaks to make sure there's not anything major that we have. We are also we've started implementing using the My Permits Now program on our side, not using the call center side. So that's in the early phases, and we're going to be doing some training on that in the next couple of weeks. That's my short and sweet director's report for this week.
Okay. Any questions? Director's report. Oliver Joseph.
Yeah. The only question I got is on the water tower. The booster pump is at Poly Alta. Did we make sure we covered that up, freeze? But that is one of the most sensitive
Yes,
booster
sir.
pump we got. So
Yeah, we currently got some insulation and wrapped a bunch of the pipes. We've tarped everything that we've needed to cover. We're going through all of our checks as far as making sure we have everything done that we can do to our best of our abilities at the moment.
sound good. Thank you. That's all.
Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll move along to item number 9. This is our monthly water reports. For those joining us for the first time, we'll have a flushing report, followed by a leak report, followed by revenue and consumption, and summing up with water audit report. Mr. Fleming.
Okay, just following, like you said, we'll start with the flushing report. Once again, the flushing report is to maintain water quality throughout the system. It's necessary to make sure all of our residual levels are appropriate to LDH standards. This flushing report does not reflect, it doesn't encompass any leaks. And this is just our means of operations. For PUA, our numbers are 933,000. For ACUD, it's 267,000. 100,000 gallons.
So move to accept the flushing report.
I don't believe we need
Second.
a motion for it, but I'm sure Gavin's appreciative, huh, Gavin?
Better
Okay,
than the first
next
time.
report.
Okay, the leak report, once again, since we've started tracking these using the call centers, calls plus our own ticket numbers, we've been able to make sure we have them tracked per PUA and ACUD systems. And we're able to make sure that any leaks that we currently have during this month, we're taking care of.
So move to accept the leak report.
Mr. Dawson, we don't need a motion, but we thank you again. Are there any questions about the leak report? Hearing none, we'll take the next report.
All right, the PUA revenue and consumption. This is our number of customers and what our consumption, these numbers are reflected into our total water audit report. The consumption amount is reflected underneath the bottom section, adjusted system input volumes. We have consumed 21 million gallons of water, and our revenue for September was $172,000.
Questions on the PUA revenue and consumption report?
Move to accept.
Thanks, Bill. God will get you. Water and audit report, Mr. Fleming?
Okay, so once again, this report, we take the water that we have received from the river, how much was lost. So the first number is how much was brought in. The filtered number is how much water was produced coming out of our system. The ACUD point of entry for joules, that number is the number that we buy from Assumption Parish for those. And then since we've been doing a little bit better job of tracking our numbers, the leaks reflect the leak report, and with all of our manual flushing sampling stations. The total processed water is the number that we use within our plant. That's, part of the production of water. So for September, our total number was 1.4 million gallons lost. I'm sorry, it's 1.4 bound. The discrepancy between these reports are, when you look at them as a year-to-date report, it shows a consistent, you were down 1 month, up another month. So that way, we're working on tracking these numbers from 2 months ago on forward, so that way we can get an accurate look at it. It's easier for us to look at actually these water loss reports on a bigger time frame than a per month, based on when each of the meters were read. So,
Questions on the system input report? Excuse me, the water audit report.
Yeah.
Mr. Joseph?
Yeah, I just want to compliment you on doing that. I mean, we've been flexing over the years and everything, and I have to give the utility department, kudos on that, because now we're starting to see where our flex water bill become. One, like you say, 1 month would be 3 or 4 million, the next month it might be 100,000 gallons. But by y'all keeping up the numbers and everything, and the whole department is tracking it, it making us more efficient, and I can see more of it covered in our revenue sources, the money. And that's what we wanted to do from the get-go,
Yes.
make sure that we can make the money off of the water system. So, thank you.
thank you.
Other questions? The chair has one question before you. Mr. Dan, you had something you want to say?
I just wanted to, I want to compliment all the workers at the water plant. When I got here a couple of years ago, this water plant was nothing but drama. Every committee meeting, there was just some drama to it. And we've worked very hard with we've got some really outstanding staff there. We're getting an upgrade. It's pretty much business as usual, and all of the credit goes to the the people we have out there. We have good operators. Gavin has stepped in, doing a great job, and Councilman Joseph, thank you for your contribution to helping make it a better run system too. But it's nice to come up here and talk about the water without there being all the drama.
I agree with you.
And the chair would concur and say that that's exactly correct, and I'm certainly appreciative that things have gotten substantially better. Do have one question. Gavin, the unauthorized consumption has a blank, no number. Can we assume that means there was no detected unauthorized consumption? It was zero, or we don't know?
Correct. It's an unknown. I think the original, I'm not really sure what the original purpose of having that line item in there, because it'd be a guess and strictly a guess, other than to make the account, make it balance out.
So you're saying we're not giving away any free water?
Not to our knowledge. I believe that's a loaded question, but we are not giving any away.
That's why I make the big bucks, but Mr. Joseph's going to be less than kind.
This is a form from the American Waterworks Association, and if you catch somebody stealing, then we would put it on there. But it's hard. I mean, we definitely try, but with the new meters and hopefully with new meter technology, we'll be able to detect it more easily in the future. And I hope that line never gets used, but if we catch somebody, that's when we'll put it on.
So the answer is because it's blank, we are unaware of any. And
Correct.
from time to time, it may have an actual number there.
That's correct, sir.
Thank you.
Hopefully never, but hard to,
Mr. Joseph?
Yeah, Doc, and that number there, I can just tell you what they're on the road. State highway contractors come in, they'll tap into a fire hydrant, and sometime they would just use up the water for what you call them, did not go to the utility department, and sometime we would catch them on that. And so that would be unauthorized, and we'll do the legal process of it. But mostly that's where they came in from, farmers or somebody is taking water from that point of fire hydrant or something, or filling up a pool or something like that.
So that's a great point, and that is one thing we're actually doing right now is we're looking at fire hydrant locks. We've been talking with the fire chief in Donaldsonville to make sure that they're on board with it, and trying to catch some of the people that are taking our unauthorized water consumption. And part of that also goes with, we are working on updating the PUA and ACUD policy manuals to combine them into one, so that way they're even across the board. And that's going to include an item in there for unauthorized water use.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. We're going to move to item number 10, which is the approval to increase the contract amount of GSA on the Rivington Force Main and Lift Station, UTL 17002. Gavin, you're on again.
Thank you. This is a contract that GSA currently has. They are in the design phase, and they're up to a point where they're starting to look at permitting. So that way the project will be able to move forward within the next year. Currently, it looks like there's going to be 5 different agencies that they need to get permits. The railroads, gas, DOTD, DHH, and then your regular permit process.
The chair will entertain a motion to approve the GSA contract.
Motion.
Okay, motion by Oliver Joseph, second by Mr. Dawson to approve. Discussion, Mr. Dawson.
Yeah, I mean, what is the existing contract? How much is the existing contract?
I do not have that number in front of me. I know it was approved back in,
Was anybody back there know?
Back when Moses was in.
and I know the contract is, look,
Yeah, the existing contract.
David, tell everybody who you are.
David Einsel with GSA.
Thank you.
The existing contract, I'm not exactly sure of the exact amount, but it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 290, maybe 300.
That was a total to design the connection
Yes, it
between
actually
Riverton
include-
and the treatment plant, is that correct?
That's correct. And in addition to that, it had some additional hydraulic modeling that would be for the whole development of that area, so that we made sure it was designed appropriately.
So
to
you
account-
guys didn't have the permitting in the original?
No, sir. No, sir.
It
So
was
that
actually, it was originally submitted on, but when they went to their final contract, there was, I think, everything everything from permitting through construction was taken out of their contract, and they only did the design with the hydraulic modeling.
So this is a lump sum addition? Am I reading this correctly?
Yes, sir.
59,423 and 43 cents. No further questions.
Any other questions? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I won't repeat the names. Madam Secretary, I guess you're comfortable with that. Any objections? Hearing none, that contract is approved. Item number 11 is the approval of a contract for conducting a feasibility impact study of 5G deployment in Ascension Parish. Mr. Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, council members. We were approached by AT&T a couple of months ago about coming in and creating an ordinance and to put 5G in the parish, which would involve some small dishes. So what we want to do is we want to look around and see what other places are doing and how they're approaching it. And so that's what this contract would do. It doesn't have anything to do with creating the ordinance to put them in. Also, we kind of wanted to amend it to look at internet service in Donaldsonville as well. We're going to be putting in a lot of lines, water lines in Donaldsonville. We wanted to put we wanted to add that to this contract as well to see if maybe if we should run some fiber optic cable along with those lines. So that's what it does. Be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Joseph.
Yeah, and I was with Mr. Daniel, and that's what's the whole goal when we looked at this, to try to put Donaldsonville in a situation where they can be prepared and ready for the next generation on the computer age. And by us going to be doing a lot of work over there, I asked for us to look at someone to do some of this type of work in Donaldsonville for the digital age coming up. So I would make the motion to approve this.
Second, I have a question.
It's been moved by Mr. Joseph, second by Mr. Dawson, to approve the contract for conducting this feasibility study for 5G deployment. And now I see why, when I talked to Mr. Daniel about this item before approving tonight's agenda, he said that, OJ, you were pushing for this, because it includes internet work on the West Bank. Is that not correct?
Correct.
Mr. Dawson.
First, did we ask for other proposals, or is this the only proposal we got?
This was an unsolicited proposal, Councilman. We had talked to this guy about doing some work in Ascension Parish before, and he comes with great references, and so when we were looking for someone to do this, we reached out to him to see if he could do it, and he said he could, so we feel.
It says estimated cost 49,500.
Well, it's a not to exceed. The contract will be not to exceed.
You didn't want to put the other 499 in there? Joking.
I'm
What are they
cutting
gonna,
back.
what are they gonna exactly do?
Sir?
They're not, what are they gonna exactly do? I mean, we had somebody come in and give us a proposal on the 5G, but what are they're not gonna go and they don't put in the antennas.
No, sir.
or anything.
No, sir. In fact, if you will recall, there was quite a few questions about coming in with 5G. Where do you put it? How's it going to work? What are other parishes doing in terms of what are their ordinances? Can we put it in areas, just to make sure we don't put it in demographic areas and leave out other demographic areas? So that's what this will do. It'll also look at what kind of assets that the parish might need to do this. But I think most importantly it is, how can the parish take advantage of this new technology? I mean, there's going to be, when 5G technology comes to the parish, we want to be in a position that where we can use it to benefit the parish. You know, I mean, look, your kids are gonna be able to download a movie in 4 seconds, I heard. But that's not where the real
Just what we
power.
need.
That's not where the real power of this comes in. It's gonna allow the parish to start doing things that they've never been able to do before. Collect traffic data, look at, light signals, to move traffic better. When the day comes when we have a regional sewer system, we have manholes. If someone's illegally pumping sewer into, discharging into our manholes, and they pick up the manholes, then we'll know about it. There's just so much technology that we'll be able to incorporate. Flooding, which streets are closed. There's just so much data that's going to be able to be collected, and we need to be able to collect that data and use it for the benefit of the public. And so that's what this is going to kind of outline
Urban
for us.
development.
Well, I'm just not sure how it's gonna help us in Donaldsonville. I mean, when we talked to, was it AT&T, who was the people, and they, they told us they put these towers where they get the most use of them, where they get the most money. We asked them if they would set aside, if they would put some in the low-income areas that we have, and never really committed to that. So how is this gonna make a difference?
Well, that's what we want to understand, what AT&T is going to do, and help us craft an ordinance to make sure that we don't leave certain demographic areas of the parish out. So that will help from this, and it will also help identify what assets we're going to need in those demographic areas, and how we can improve the lives of the citizens in those demographic areas too. So we're looking at a really comprehensive report here that will kind of.
What's the timeline on this?
I'm not 100% sure about that, as long as it takes to do it, but I mean,
It wasn't a quick turnaround.
Maybe you ought to get that.
Turnaround.
that'll be in the contract, sir.
Okay. I don't have anything else.
Thank you. So, Mr. Daniel, I have a question myself. Now I know why you didn't want me to move this to strategic planning. I was hoping we could put it there and have them spend some of the people's money for a change instead of utilities, but I couldn't escape that since I served there too. But will this technology have any benefit in SCADA systems? And
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's,
so
again.
that's a big process as we venture into, as you said a minute ago, a potential regional sewer system.
Right, and it's not just sewer, but it's drainage SCADA. I mean, look, I was talking with Ron the other day about, he said, man, we had to wake somebody up to go out and start the such and such pump. I said, why don't we have that remoted and automatic, and why didn't it come on, or why doesn't it call somebody on the phone when the water gets to a certain level? So now we're out looking, the USGS has sensors that tell when the water rises, and we can make our phones ring. With 5G technology, there's plenty of bandwidth to do all those kind of things.
Okay, so any further questions? Mr. Lawler?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see that there's a real need for this contract right now. It's almost like we're putting the horse before the cart. I think we've all agreed that, I know when I spoke with the people in AT&T about putting the 5G in Donaldsonville early on, and other areas of the parish, I just, the review of critical infrastructure required to support 5G deployment in the parish, I mean, that's what AT&T is going to be doing. They're going to be putting in that infrastructure. I don't see where this $50,000 is needed at this time. Maybe once we have 5G into our parish, then we look at how we can better utilize it. But if we don't even know where it is.
Well, and that's what we hope to do with this, is to guide them where we want to put it, because they may say, well, we don't see any need for having 5G out, for example, near the Marvin Bro pump area. And we'll say, oh no, we've got to have 5G there because we want to run a very extensive SCADA system there, so we'll know what's going on all the time. So this is the blueprint to help us work with AT&T so that we can find out where we want this critical infrastructure. Where do we need it? How are we going to, I want to craft an ordinance with AT&T that doesn't allow them to come in and put it in, the 10 most used places where they can make the most money off of it. I want them to put it in places that benefit the entire parish, and that's what I'm hoping this study is going to help us get.
I don't think we need the study. Quite honestly. I think we can derive that information from what we know about the parish. I mean, we know Donaldsonville needs it. We know we need it along our major infrastructure ways. We know that we need it at all the pumping stations. We know that it would be a huge benefit at Lamar Dixon.
And look,
This is
Councilman,
$50,000.
I don't want to be argumentative.
I
but,
understand.
The technology today is so advancing so fast and so rapidly that we can't possibly know all there is to know about this stuff. And when you do that, when you jump into the technology without a blueprint on where you want to go, then you invariably get left behind in some form or fashion, and the big tech companies pretty much have their way. I would prefer to try to think ahead and get out in front of them and try to figure out what is it that we want to accomplish with this 5G, and what kind of assets do we need to help them, and then use this to help write an ordinance so that we can get what we want, as opposed to AT&T telling us what we need. Because I don't really trust AT&T and all the other companies to accurately tell us what we need. I trust them to accurately tell us, this is where we're going to make the most money, and so this is why we want you to put it here.
I understand, and I would expect that out of AT&T. But, this didn't even go out for a bid. I just have a problem with that we're just
understand.
accepting, there were no rush for this. I think this should go out for a bid and see if we can get it for a better price. And frankly, for what they list, where'd it go? Oh, doggone it. These computers are so technical and confusing. I just, some of the things that they list as the study will include, I just don't see a real need for it for $50,000. We could probably get a lot of what we need for less than that. I just don't see a need for this right now. That's
Okay,
all.
well, reasonable people can disagree.
So can we.
Well, which one of us are you referring to?
Okay, I believe we do have a motion, a section on table 2 approved, but I do detect some dissension on this issue. Good discussion. Thank you, gentlemen, for it. So
I'd like to make a substitute motion.
I was going to call for a roll call vote, and has to be voted last just to break the impending tie, but go ahead, Mr. Dawson.
I'd like to move that we send this back to the Utilities Department and get proposals.
I'll second that.
Okay, we're going to do it the same way with it, so that's an amended motion to move it to the Utilities Department as opposed to the full council, and it's been seconded by Mr. Lawler, motion by Mr. Dawson. Madam Secretary, well, first of all, any discussion of the amended motion?
Well, on that amended motion,
Here,
okay.
yes or no, Mr.?
Yeah, I just, I understand what it, but the biggest thing was when this thing came up, it was basic because Downsonville is moving with the new Lafourche pumping station that elevate the top of the Bayou Lafourche. It's also adding some pumping system that's going to be manual control. We have the mega site in Modas that we was making sure that we can provide that capability out there to those areas, further develop those areas. We know we need roadway out there. We were looking at 3127, and we have made that corridor basic commercial, residential. So the feasibility study was going to basically cover all those areas to look at it and making sure that the future plan was planned out properly. I understand what your concern is and everything, but once again, our only concern is always the West Bank and making sure that we can be ahead. We've been behind for the last 100 years, and this would be the first time that we'll be putting a step forward for the future. And to have that knowledge in advance and have that study would help Donaldsonville. You also know there's a opportunity zone, you know, there's a HUD zone. All this information here would help develop the West Bank economically. It's just not just for individual contract. I just want to make sure that everyone understands how this would impact the West Bank future. Because currently, right now, there's no economic development over there. That's all.
Okay. Mr. Dawson, further discussion?
Just, to respond to Mr. Joseph, the motion was, there's no intent to kill this. You know, I think it's a worthy thing to try to accomplish. It's just, you know, I think we should get at least another proposal, see if there are other people that are interested in this, you know, and bring it back to this committee with hope, 2 proposals. If there's not another proposal, then so be it. But, you know, taking these unsolicited proposals, I think is not in the best interest of the parish.
And Bill, I have no problem with that. I just wanted you to know where I stand at on it, okay? So, no.
I always know where you stand.
Okay,
No question about that.
If there's no further discussion on the amended motion that I have a first and second to, which is remind everyone out there that's keeping score to send this to Utilities Department, not the full council, so that we can get another proposal, and maybe instead of just sole sourcing right now and using an unsolicited proposal with, I forget the company's name, MSF Global. I'm going to go ahead and exercise the chair's privilege to call the question, and we're going to do this by roll call vote because, again, I think even the amended motion is probably going to have some dissension. Daphne? So we're voting on, so the committee is clear. I guess it was your motion, Mr. Dawson?
What?
To amended motion that we're going to Utilities Department, not the full council. Go.
Doc Satterley?
No, I'm going to be last, dear.
Oh, you're okay.
I may not have to vote. There may not be no
She
tie
needs to
here.
use her mic, please.
And Oliver Joseph?
No.
Councilman Lawson?
Yes.
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 Okay, and, well, I was going to vote on that side anyway, so the answer from the chair is yes. Let the record show, Madam Secretary, 4-1, amended motion carries. Introduction of the sewer system, item number 12 is introduction of the sewer system donation for the Oaks on 30, LLC. Mr. Fleming. This is an act of donation, correct?
Yes, sir. Hold on, let me get my binder. My apologies, I was on the wrong item.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. This is for acceptance of a new sewer
I
system
think there was last time.
located on
No, this-
Highway 30. Okay. In your packet right now, we have a current act of donations, which has been prepared by the owner of the property, along with a copy of the survey of the property, along with all appropriate servitudes and abilities to access the facility. And I apologize for not giving y'all, we have done a survey and an inspection report on the property. Everything is in great condition because it's brand new, but it's also a system that we would like, if we have to proceed down this path again, adopting into our system so that way it matches what this facility has.
What?
Okay, is that it, Mr. Fleming?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'll start the discussion with myself this time. I guess my confusion, and I probably should have detected this in approving the agenda, is the word introduction. You don't mean that in the sense of like introduction of an ordinance, which only the full council can do. We can only make recommendations here, and that don't usually go introductions of ordinance through any committee of the full council. So what exactly are you asking us to do tonight? To approve or to recommend to the full council? Might be a better way of
Yes,
phrasing
sir.
this.
This would be to recommend to the full council.
That we accept this sewer system donation.
Yes,
Is
sir.
that what's being asked?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the chair will now open it up for discussion. Mr. Dawson.
So last time we brought something, you say this is brand new, never had no water running through it now?
No, sir.
sewer?
It's, I'm not even sure I think their building may have just gotten their occupancy permit it's all brand new
So
construction.
do we have some kind of guarantee on performance?
Yes, sir. Per our ordinances, it has to meet all DEQ standards. And we have 1 year to make them do any improvements that are necessary to
So
make.
that's going to be part of this, is that in this active donation, or is that in the transfer of property anywhere?
No, sir. That's part of our laws for, the parish. But we can definitely add some verbiage in there if you would prefer that.
Well, I would think it would need to be in the transfer, in the paperwork for the title transfer, that if they're guaranteeing performance, then, I'd like to know for how long, and were they guaranteeing do they have a permit? Is it permitted?
It is permitted.
We go out and test them prior to when we accept one from a developer, Councilman, we go out and test it ahead of time to make sure that it's working the way it's supposed to. We fill it up with water, we run the whole test through. We'll do the same thing with this. Whatever warranty is on it, will then accrue to the parish. I think we have it in there that they've got I think it's 2 years, but I can't remember right off the bat. I think it's 2 years.
2 years of guaranteed performance?
Yes, sir.
They'll guarantee that it'll meet the DEQ discharge parameters.
Yes,
Is
sir.
that correct?
Yes, sir.
So I'd like to make sure that that's in the paperwork somewhere. And then, previously when we brought these in, we at least had a picture of it here. I mean, I don't see anything but the active donation, and then there's a survey of the property.
We can forward the.
So is there something?
No, that was an
I'd like to
oversight
make
on
sure there's something that's sitting there.
Don't say our.
All right, this was an oversight on my part.
Thank you. No,
But we did do our due diligence. We do have the picture.
How
We
many,
do
how many,
have
what
the
is this
special
treat? Is this a little shopping center? Is that what it is?
No, this is a Zachary Construction. They built two pre-engineered metal buildings on the site. It's right about in the curve of Highway 30.
they have a fab shop, an office, and a
Okay.
what's the third building? It's small.
So it's office buildings? Is that
Yes,
what it generally treats? No,
Yes, sir.
food
No
products or
chemicals. No, sir.
okay, thank you.
Other questions? Oh, Chair has a question before we act on this item. I read in the introduction, or in the proposed ordinance for introduction for the full council that will be either recommending or not tonight, it says this donation is made for in consideration of the mutual benefits accruing to the parties here too, which is Ascension and the donor. Both the donor and the donee, which is AP, Ascension Parish, agree that the approximate value of the donation is $188,240. My question becomes, how was that number derived? Please don't tell me they said it's worth that, we agree to it, and they get that tax write-off that for donating it. Or I guess better way of proposing, putting a question forward is, what was the due diligence done on AP's part, on the parish's part, to value this asset at $188,000?
We have copies of all of the invoices from the company that installed the system and all such related invoices.
Good answer. Okay, Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilman Dawson, second by Councilman Lawler, that we move this to the full council as a recommendation for for their eventual approval or not. Any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, item number 12 is approved. Item number 13.
Item number 13, this was something we were trying to bring to y'all's attention, which I know y'all do not have a copy of it. I believe we're probably gonna have to push this to another.
Well, let me at least read the description for the folks playing it along at home. This is an introduction, so I guess it's going to have an ordinance eventually of the illicit, which is not in, you just said, not in our packets, and I can assure you it isn't, of the illicit discharge and connection stormwater ordinance. So is it?
So I move we
You wanna-
defer.
you wanna-
They don't have
Second.
to.
If you'd like me to give you a brief description
We
of
can
it.
either defer it or you can bring it back, your choice.
We'll bring it
Yeah,
back.
defer.
Let's
We'll bring it
defer,
back.
please.
Defer to the next meeting.
So you're making that as a motion?
Yeah, yeah.
Second.
And you second it? So it's been moved by Councilman Dawson, second by Ms. Casso, that we defer this to the very next meeting and make a decision then. Any discussion, any questions? Any objections? Hearing none. Item number 13 is deferred to our next Utilities Utilities Committee meeting. And here it is, folks, drum roll. Item number 14. I know you're all not staying here just because you like being here at late hours and you're making all the big bucks like we are in a time and a half. So this is, and I want you to pay attention to that first word, because people have been asking me in the last 48 hours plus. Is this for discussion purposes? Doc, sadly not. It says approval, key word, of the construction, operation, in cooperative endeavor agreement. That's the second CEA between Ascension Consolidated Utilities District Number 2 and the Consortium of Ascension Sewer LLC. Now, we're going to have various people involved in the discussion here tonight. I'm going to announce them, but first we've got some public comments, so we're going to go to that immediately after. I've cleared up this last housekeeping. Mr. Gavin Fleming and/or Mr. William Daniel in the Utilities Department are going to speak on the issue. Mr. Jeff Bodier, Ascension Sewer LLC, and/or his associate, Mr. Jenkins. There's Tim Hardy as well as David Fleshman from Brazil, Soxy, and Wilson. And last but not least, which is going to be some of the newest information in this ever-continuing saga, Stephen Alton Smith from Ernst & Young. And Bill, for your benefit, it's not Ernest & Young. The E is correctly missing. Is going to give a report on the finances. Before we do that, I do have two speakers' cards that have been filled out, both green cards in support of the approving this item this evening. And we'll begin straight away with Councilman Randy Kluot.
Thank you, Chairman Satterley and committee. Appreciate the opportunity to talk in front of you guys. Whatever happens today, I'll be looking at it down the road, and hopefully in a full meeting that we can all deliberate on. I just want to review some of the things, the history of this. You know, as every time we reach the end of a year, end of an election term, anything, somebody always asks me, why you want to hurry up and do this, okay? Well, hurry up is going on 25 years, okay? I mean, this was, we have some of the people in the audience here that's been involved in the 90s, okay, to bring this thing forward. We had another decent attempt in 2001. Somewhere, I think it would have been the October or November council meetings of 2001. I, as the chair of this committee in 2015, we worked about a year and a half on it, and we brought it forward, and kind of in the same age group as an election term. It was right in the last half. By the time it reached the committee, it was the last half of the last year of that term. And you know, I thought we had some things that we could go forward with then, and we had a good basis. Well, I can tell you right now, we got it in front of us again. And I think we have a decent proposal overall in front of us. I think we have, I'm going to sit here right now and tell you I'm in favor of it. I represent, right now, I'm representing, and I have the elect that will be taking my place in the audience come January, and we'll carry on that sword and move forward. and we need to move forward. There's some things that, I guess, y'all worked with me for a lot of years, and one of my main things is don't lose focus of the mission, okay? The mission is to get the sewage out of our canals and put it in the Mississippi River where DEQ and everybody else wants it, okay? It's a quality of life issue. There's because in Santa Maria, we're swimming downstream from the major polluters of the parish, which is the north end, and the other three parishes that come down to us, okay? In 2014, late 2014, early 2015, we really did try to pick out how much sewage does Ascension Parish put in Manchac versus East Baton Rouge, Iberville, and then when it gets to the A-Meet, well, you got the other two states and 15 parishes that feed into it. We didn't come up with any good numbers, okay? But you know what? The mandates that are facing us, they didn't talk about the rest of the parishes. They looked at us. 25 years ago, we said, hey, they got a train coming. We know somebody told us they got a train coming. We got to fix this track. 10 years after that, we said, hey, somebody saw that train up there. Said, y'all get that track fixed? No, we're going to fix it now. Well, we didn't fix it. 2015, we said, hey, we got the conductor of that train, the federal agency and state agencies were sitting in this audience telling us what our mandates were. That's 4 years ago, okay? All right? Well, now you can see the lights of the train, and it's coming. Just as you've done, Chairman Lawler on roads is chairing that committee, and the rest of you guys on every other department. This is a utilities issue. This is an infrastructure issue. Every time we build a new road, we've got to put millions of dollars in infrastructure down for sewer. That's mandated, especially on the state highway improvements that come in. And whether we talk about the state or not, we've enjoyed a hell of a lot, millions of dollars in Ascension Parish in road improvements. Maybe not enough, but we're getting it there. So I'm asking this committee to deliberate tonight. There's going to be some questions that are not answered. There's going to be some things in different phases that's going to come down the road that it's not part of this group, but even part of the group that's sitting in the audience that's elected, it's going to come in January, is going to be able to deliberate on. But I'm asking you guys, the responsibilities that's charged in front of us as elected officials, and we're serving right now, is to not hand the ball off. Let's move forward with what we got. There's nothing that we're going to do that's going to change if you want to go forward with sewer. And I heard the buzzer, sir. And
Yeah.
I'm going to try to wrap it up.
Let me say this, Mr. Cluart, I assume you're speaking as a councilman more than just a citizen tonight. So if you need a few more seconds, sir, have at it, but that is 3 minutes. But
Yes.
maybe-
And as a councilman over District 6 in Santa Maria, I know that there will be several phases before we get some good service down there, but I do know that there's a possibility of getting service in small areas and adding on stuff. But we know where our population's at. You guys, y'all have 3 of the top districts out of the 5 that are the main stakeholders for the population of the parish. And we're willing to go forward. We know because everything's coming downhill. And not only that, let's not forget the millions and millions of dollars we spend on drainage, on ditches that are just silt in less than a year based on the sewer that's going into ditches. So I'm asking you guys, you've all studied it. Some of you guys are great at spreadsheets, others are good at formulas, others are good at looking at contracts. So you have a good group up here. I'm asking you to please take a look at it tonight, but let's give the whole council the ability to make the decision on that. Thank you very much.
And we thank you, Councilman Cluart. Our next speaker tonight, green card speaking in support, is President-elect Clint Quintmall. And so we're going to extend to him the same courtesy we did just now for Ms. Cluart. Clint, you may hear the timer go off at 3 minutes. Don't let it over-vex you. considering your current position in this parish, I think we can afford another 30, 40 seconds, whatever you need, but please try to keep it, because I'm sure the discussion when you quit is going to be vigorous and long.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. First, there's not a neutral card. Okay, it's either green or red.
I did notice the color, and I was a little confused.
Yeah, so, just want to clarify, might want to put a third option up here in the future. First, I would like to thank this committee on their hard work on the sewer proposal. I would ask this committee to be patient and continue to negotiate this contract. At this time, through my analysis over several weeks, including the new information we just got November 6th, I would recommend that we continue to negotiate based on these items. There's an uncertainty in the rate mechanism for which the rates are set. There's always an increase, never a possible decrease. I would like to see a rate mechanism plugged in to ensure if there's cost overruns, if there's unexpected cost, what those would be. I would like to see that modeled by a professional organization to ensure that is accurate and put into the contract. The risk with the proposal appears to me to be one-sided. It appears that the parish is taking almost 100% of the risk in this contract. I consider that unacceptable. Seems to be much needed risk analysis and uncertainty with the construction cost and the future construction costs on how this bidded out. I know that because of the public funds that are put up by the parish, that those bidding laws exist, but they don't exist on the private side. There's no guidelines to that. I would like to see that analyzed and spelled out exactly how it should be. Hookup fees, I didn't see that and how that was proposed in this analysis. These hookup fees could be anywhere from $2,500 to $5,000. I would like to ask our citizens how they expect to pay for that. Is that a one-time fee? Is that going to be over on top of their in 10-year $80 a month fee? How that's going to work? How are citizens going to pay for the hookups? I just addressed that. Clearly define annual or quarterly reports regarding transparency of this deal. Since we're talking transparency, I would encourage open public meetings when we get the specific details on the final agreement to get the public input, so since it will be them paying the bills. I don't think that we've had a single public meeting with the final numbers. I think it's super important that we get the public's input on the hookup fees, also the individual units and how they will be addressed. There seems to be a reward mechanism for delays and cost overruns. I would like a third-party attorney and organization to look at that and analyze that. If that's the case, that's troubling, and that needs to be analyzed. What I hope is that we move with caution. This is a 30-year agreement. Hundreds of millions of dollars in fees that our residents will have to pay. I would just, if you asked me today if I would sign this agreement, the answer would absolutely be no. So I encourage you, please, let's do our due diligence. We have a 25-month agreement to get the best possible deal for the citizens of Ascension Parish, and I encourage everyone to do exactly that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Quintmont. All right. Let's see, Mr. Daniel, I thought, unless you have different druthers, that maybe we would begin with the new information, which is the Ernst & Young report, or do you want to say something
Oh,
preliminary?
no,
to that?
that's exactly what I wanted to say. I did want to remind the council that, we did a business-as-usual model, and it's not very optimistic. You know, we're gonna lose quite a bit of money next year as well. But I did want to say that that business as usual model was analyzed in the Ernst Young report, so you'll be able to discuss it in there as well. So I agree with you 100%. I think we need to bring up Ernst Young and start with them.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I've captured some notes from all the public speakers and as well as your preliminary remarks, Mr. Daniels. So again, we thank you for all that, and the chair will be reminding some people that later to see if we can get answers to some of the questions that are on the table already. With that, though, we'll begin with the Ernst & Young report. And let's see. Is it Aughton Smith? Or I'm just going to call you Mr. Smith, if you don't mind, sir. And
Permission
welcome
granted.
tonight. And I know you promised us last time that you'd be coming with this. For those at home, again, keeping score that haven't seen it, this is the work product of Ernst & Young, and it encompasses 58 pages, to be exact, of interesting information, to say the least. Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much. So my intention was to provide a brief verbal summary of our analysis and then answer any questions you might have. If that makes sense, I will do that. But clearly, if you want to ask questions as we go or want to cut straight to the questions, then I'm happy to do that as you see fit.
You want to bably interrupt? Summary. Anybody have druthers? In sidebar, excuse me for a minute.
Prefers.
Well, I'm hearing that everybody wants to wait for the summary.
Whatever he prefers.
Okay. We're going to let you go all the way through, and then we're going to
All right. Okay.
go out there
excellent.
you. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so our scope of work was to do two things. One, to provide a financial analysis of the district's business as usual case, and to understand the basis for that, the uncertainties and risks contained within it, and to analyze the extent to which a rate of $60 per month as an acceptable utility fee could be supported under the business as usual case. And then secondly, to look at the evaluation of the Ascension sewer proposal from the perspective of the financial standing of the counterparties to the transaction, the financial analysis underpinning the proposal, and then to undertake a range of sensitivities to look at the potential impact on future rates as a result of risks that the parish and its stakeholders continue to bear under the contract. So if we talk briefly about the business as usual case, what we've looked at is essentially the financial analysis that has been put forward by Gavin and his colleagues. And the core of the analysis suggests that under a technical solution which is fundamentally a amend and make do continuation of the current status quo, albeit with investment to better meet required discharge standards, a significant amount of capital expenditure is going to be required in the forthcoming years. And the combined effect of that and a starting rate of $60 a month leads to a significant financial deficit for the district over the life of the period of the analysis, which is 20 years, to the tune of around $27 million. Now, that analysis assumes a number of things. It assumes a $60 per month starting rate, a 3% growth in rates over time, and a 2% increase in the underlying rate base of the district over time as well. Now, the starting number of customers in that analysis is 2,192, which is slightly different from what Ascension Sewer are estimating current customer base to be. So what we've done in this analysis is then to recut the business as usual case using the same starting customer base as Ascension Sewer, and then looking at the impact of a rate growth or a rate-based growth equivalent to Ascension Sewer of 3% per annum. And whilst that in itself reduces the scale of the deficit at $60 a month, it doesn't remove it. It effectively halves it to around $13 million. Now, the business as usual case also assumes that all the capital works will be funded up front on a pay-go basis, whereas clearly the Ascension Sewer proposal assumes that those capital works are financed over time. So if we assume in our analysis that instead of funding on a pay-go basis, an SRF loan is utilized to fund or finance the capital works, that removes some of the initial upfront burden, but it then creates a financing charge over the life of the project. So it doesn't eliminate the deficit completely, but rather spreads it more evenly over time. So I think the business as usual case is going to struggle to reach a position where the district is financially self-sufficient at $60 a month. And the other thing that has to be borne in mind is the estimates that have been put forward, the underlying capital and operating costs, have been put forward as, you know, as well as they can be, but they haven't been subject to detailed design or market testing or any kind of third-party validation or diligence. So in effect, there's a significant risk of forecasting error in those costs. And forecasting errors tend to be on the optimistic side, so there is a reasonable basis for believing that capital and operating costs under this scenario could well be higher than set out in the case. Now, we haven't looked at every conceivable scenario for business as usual, but I think our view and the view in the report is that $60 a month is unlikely to lead to the district becoming financially self-sufficient without continuing support in one form or another from the parish. Clearly it is possible to construct scenarios whereby financial self-sufficiency is achieved, but then one is layering assumption on assumption on assumption to get to that point. So, we're not going to say it's impossible, but our analysis suggests it's going to be quite a challenge. So maybe in brief summary, then, the key challenge is the capital expenditure that's required to meet discharge standards and to modernize the system to a point equivalent to the Ascension Sewer proposal. This is likely to require a rate in excess of $60 a month unless some form of additional or incremental financial contribution from the parish is made, which may be attractive or it may not be. And the business as usual case is subject to the same or greater cost uncertainty than we'll talk about in the context of the Ascension Sewer proposal. So those are my key takeaways really on the business as usual case. So if we move to the analysis of the Ascension Sewer proposal itself, as I mentioned at the beginning, our analysis really covered three key components. One, an analysis of the financial standing of the principal counterparties that the parish would be dealing with, in this case Bernhard, AWT, and an as yet unidentified construction contractor who would deliver the works. We've had a fairly substantive look at Ascension Sewer's financial model to understand the key inputs, cost drivers, both financial and technical with the assistance of our technical subcontractor HNTB. And what we've been really trying to do is look at the extent to which the rates proposed by Ascension Sewer are justified by the financial model and sustainable over time. And we've then bolstered that analysis with various sensitivities, essentially looking at a range of what-if scenarios if certain factors come to bear, and what would that mean for either the financial standing of Ascension Sewer, if it is absorbing those risks, or the impact or potential impact on rates if that is being passed back to the ratepayer. So I'll briefly deal with each one of those in turn. So from a financial standing analysis perspective, so Bernhard Capital Partners Management LLP will be the entity contributing the equity to the project. And as a brief reminder, the financing structure of this project is a combination of equity from Bernhard an SRF loan from DEQ, and commercial debt sourced by Bernhardt to fill the gap. And then on top of that, there's the $15.8 million assumed capital contribution from the parish. So Bernhardt is effectively a fund, and therefore doesn't create financial statements in a way that would be that helpful to understanding financial capacity. So we sought an equity commitment letter, and we asked for a whole range of things. We got a letter back, which was a little briefer than we had hoped, but it was signed by the CFO, committing that the fund had resources at its disposal and without significant additional approvals could commit the equity required for the project. So I think that is comforting and satisfying there. Ascension wastewater treatment, when it effectively becomes part of Ascension Sewer, will be the core of the operating capacity for Ascension Sewer. So whilst AWT won't exist in its current form, should this deal proceed, its core operating capability will form a lot of the core of Ascension Sewer. So we've looked at AWT in that context. AWT have provided us under non-disclosure agreement 5 years of their financial statements, which we have looked at. I can't, for the purposes of this meeting, talk in any detail about specific numbers, but what I can say is they have demonstrated that they are a financially stable business. Their financial metrics are consistent and generally upwardly trending over the last 4 years in particular. But it is important to note that, and this is self-evident in some ways, but important from a concessional P3 perspective, that AWT, in transferring to Ascension Sewer as an operator, will be pretty much 100% dependent on the success of this contract for its ongoing financial existence. So that, in one way, is not entirely surprising, but on the other hand, that does limit the Ascension Sewer organization's ability to accept material operating risk, because it's not like a large multi-utility where it can absorb losses in one area against profits elsewhere. So really, the financial stability of AWT as a business going forward will depend on the success of this contract. So on one hand, that's a strong incentive towards positive performance. On the other hand, their ability to absorb losses as a result of underperformance will be limited. And then to finally round that out, we would normally expect to look at the financial standing of the construction contractor as the party ultimately bearing a significant amount of the design, build, and completion risk. At this point in time, a construction contractor hasn't been appointed, so we haven't been able to do any analysis on that. So if we turn to the financial model, we've looked at key inputs, assumptions, and value drivers. And I think to conclude, the model as it is, so the core financial spreadsheets that effectively predict the impact of rates and costs on financial return to Bernhardt and an ability to repay debt, it's logically constructed, it appears to be arithmetically accurate. It is not a tariff model, it is not a rate model, it is a investment model that has been developed by Bernhardt largely for the purposes of it pricing the deal from its own perspective. So it does what it's supposed to do, but it, in our mind, is not necessarily a complete anchor point for current rate case and future rate case analysis. Now, it wouldn't take a great deal to turn it into that, but it currently isn't that, nor was it designed to be so. So it's not a deficiency as such, it just performs and fulfills a slightly different purpose. And I think the point that was raised earlier in connection with the model and the contract is that whilst there is a clear process to follow in the C&O agreement as to how rates are set, proposed, agreed or not, there isn't currently a very clear mechanic by which the detail of cost changes feed through a model into a rate, which then forms part of that process. And if this model were upgraded somewhat to a more consistent rate model, then it would be easy to construct a mechanic that gave a little more specificity around future rate changes. So if we turn to the financing structure for a moment, so as I mentioned, the project assumes DEQ loan, commercial debt, and sponsor equity. Now, the DEQ loan, I think, is presumed in the model to be de facto borrowed by Ascension Sewer. My understanding is that that debate is still ongoing about whether Ascension Sewer can be the beneficiary of the DEQ loan or whether that needs to be the parish, and some back-to-back agreement or indemnity needs to be in place in order to insulate the parish from the consequences of performance on repayment. But notwithstanding that, the model fundamentally assumes $60 million of DEQ loan, and the contract relies on that in establishing the starting rate of $57.90. The commercial debt structure is at least by our understanding, a holding pattern assumption whilst the rest of the deal is being developed, and Ascension Sewer are, we understand, talking to potential funders to come up with a more final debt structure. But right now, the commercial loan structure in the model is one which is one of effectively a construction period loan, whereby commercial debt is drawn during construction and then repaid as quickly as possible after construction. So what that means is that the debt is repaid quickly and then returns to equity follow later. Now, that has the potential to be and I say potential, to be a relatively inefficient financing structure compared to what may be achieved. In utility concession P3 projects that we've seen, it is usually possible to obtain longer term debt, perhaps through bonds, and a higher level of gearing. So the version of the model that we have is a conservative assumption. And from that perspective, it is unlikely in our judgment that the financing structure is going to be a source of rate increase in the future. It is a conservative, prudent assessment from Bernhardt's perspective, but it may be possible to do better than that when detailed conversations with financiers are had and the construction contractor is identified and other areas of uncertainty are resolved. And if that is the case, then as we'll see in the sensitivities, there is the potential to either improve the efficiency of the project in terms of rate impact, or it could yield an equity upside to Bernhardt. So we've looked at equity return, and I know this is obviously a source of considerable interest. So Ascension Sewer have been perfectly transparent with us over their pre-tax and post-tax equity return assumptions. And those assumptions are very much consistent with those that we see in the market for regulated U.S. water utilities and electric and gas utilities as well. So it is, that's a much bigger data set. There are lots of regulated utilities out there, municipal or otherwise. From a relatively small data set of precedent wastewater P3 concession projects, which have, and again, the data sets shrink smaller again, but based on similar sort of risk characteristics to this deal, again, return is pretty consistent. So the long story short, the headline equity rate of return is consistent with market. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the level of gearing in this deal is relatively low, and the debt structure is relatively conservative. So if those things were to change, then equity return could be higher. So if we turn to capital and operating costs, and this analysis has been largely done by HNTB, and as our subcontractor, I'm filtering the results of that back to you. There are two kind of key areas of uncertainty here. Firstly, the underlying cost of the construction program, and secondly, the timetable under which that construction program can be implemented. Now, the financial model assumes, at a simplified level, a 3-year program from 2020 to 2022, with the principal facilities being available in 2022. The underlying engineering estimates that have been shared with us suggest a a longer period between 4.5 to 5 years, including a more extended permitting and development process prior to construction. So the financial model and the engineering schedule, such as they are, don't quite match up. And the belief, based at least on the information that we've seen, is that the 4.5 to 5 year schedule doesn't leave a lot of room for things to go wrong. It in itself is a relatively tight schedule when you factor in design, permitting, site issues that go along with building a plant like this. Secondly is the construction cost and the level of design that has gone into it to date. So the model assumes $215 million of capital expenditure in the early years of the project to build out the core of the system. And Ascension Sewer have suggested that that is based on a design estimate at around 30% design. That may or may not be true. The level of detail that we have seen suggests a lower level of design advancement, maybe in the 5 to 10% range. And I appreciate there are, differences of views amongst engineers and financial people as to what levels have been achieved. But nevertheless, and of course recognizing the substantial history of this project over time, as far as the data that we have seen, the project is at a relatively early stage of design. So whilst the cost estimates have been developed by professional engineers, in part based on the history of this project in previous iterations, the level of contingency in the project costs are around 10%, which is somewhat below sort of the combined view of EY and HNTB for that level of design. So rather than arguing about whether the design is at 5% or 10% or 30%, or arguing about whether a 10% contingency or not is appropriate, we've run some sensitivity analysis to look at the potential rate impact of construction price changes in the future. But I think regardless of the precise numbers, design is at a relatively early stage. From an operating cost perspective, O&M projections are based largely on the historic values of the parish's own experience of running its part of the system and AWT's experience of running its part of the system. So from the perspective of historic costs, one can be confident that they are reasonably accurate. In terms of predicting forwards, there's an assumption of 2% indexation of costs over time. But whilst AWT obviously has deep experience of managing its own assets and its own operations in its service area, it's not entirely clear how far operating costs in the forecast are specifically reflective of the changed operational configuration of the system. Clearly, we're moving to a rather different world with a larger centralized facility and a different distribution configuration. And the operating costs have made a range of fairly simplified assumptions of, on balance, it will look a lot like it has in the past. Now, I'm not sure how accurate that is. And again, I think it is reflective of a relatively early stage of cost development in aspects of this proposal. So the price as set out right now is $57.90 as a starting rate. And clearly we understand why it's been set at that level. There is an expectation of rate increases over time based on a 4% increase per annum, based in turn on a 3% increase in the underlying rate base of the project. Now, if construction costs or operating costs are materially different from those set out in this model, the CNO agreement, at least by our commercial read, allows Ascension Sewer to come back and request a rate increase for reasonably incurred or predicted costs that arise as a result of the continued development of the design and the execution of the project. So in that respect, there is the potential for rates to increase at a rate greater than 4% should those events materialize. Now, in the world of municipal utilities or investor-owned utilities, that isn't necessarily an unreasonable state of affairs. Return is relatively modest, the amount of risk borne is relatively low, and there should be a mechanism by which actually reasonably and properly incurred costs are recovered through the rate base. In a P3 world, the position is typically rather harsher in terms of transferring construction, design, and operating cost risks. But even in a pure P3 world, no developer or construction contractor is going to guarantee fixed prices at the level of design and cost development that this is at. So it is not fundamentally unreasonable for mechanics to exist by which the rate is adjusted in the future should these estimates be incorrect. So the key question really is, how confident are we on the current estimates, and what are which I think we've talked to, and what are the consequences if those estimates turn out to be wrong? So if we look briefly at the sensitivity analysis, and I appreciate that dealing with this verbally is going to be rather challenging, but I'll just draw some broad conclusions. In effect, there are kind of two scenarios: that a negative event happens, which drives costs up, and Ascension Sewer has a reasonable basis for requesting a rate increase to recover those costs over time, or something positive happens, which means costs are actually lower or different from expected, and that creates either an opportunity for rates to be mitigated or moderated, or it creates an equity return upside for Ascension Sewer. Now, right now, as far as the contract is written, again, from a commercial and not a legal read, there really isn't a mechanic by which rates can be mitigated or reduced as a result of positive events happening. The direction of travel is really in the expectation of things, going upwards, and that's, again, the contract has been substantially drafted by someone who is very concerned about things going wrong and costs going up. So it's not entirely unexpected. But what this shows is that for construction costs, for operating expenses, for and DEQ loan availability, those are three key drivers of rate increases going forward if the estimates in the model are incorrect. And there's a range of potential outcomes. I won't kind of go into the details here, but construction costs are probably one of the most impactful, because they have an impact on costs up front, they have an impact on financing costs, which in turn have an impact on equity return. So there's a cascade effect of increasing construction costs. So for example, a 10% increase in construction costs could have a rate impact of $10+ a month if that crystallizes. Equally, if the DEQ loan is unavailable, and then Ascension Sewer has to secure that funding or that financing from equity and commercial debt to fill the gap, that again will tend to push the cost up. And clearly, I would say we have done this analysis outside of Ascension Sewer's model using our own analysis. One should see this as order of magnitude analysis, because clearly we are approximating a whole range of things in a relatively complex commercial deal. So this is indicative order of magnitude analysis and shouldn't be relied on as a to the cent level of precision. And there are two areas where I think the slight asymmetry in the contract is evident, and one is if Ascension Sewer is able to secure long-term commercial debt on more efficient structure than is currently modelled, there isn't really a mechanic by which that benefit can be passed back to the parish or the ratepayer, so it would tend to improve equity return, other things remaining equal. And equally, if there is a delayed construction start compared to the base case financial model, so if we are modelling it at 4.5 to 5 years rather than 3, because rates are going up on day one, that is creating surplus, extra cash cushion, which can reduce the financing requirement, which can then also increase equity return if that crystallizes after the contract is signed and the starting rate has agreed. So these are things that if in a, it could easily be dealt with in an amendment to the contract, but right now, as currently drafted, there is a general trend towards cost recovery in the event that things go wrong, and an asymmetry if things go well. I think that's probably enough from me. For now, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, and we thank you, Mr. Smith. We're going to start this evening, I guess, with my right, and do as we typically do in this committee, go at least one round, if not two. Mr. Dawson?
Well, thank you. I appreciate the presentation, and I do want to compliment you guys on a thorough job. And I thought it was well laid out and impartial. So I guess the business as usual. I'll start there, and I'd like to understand. Did we really do an apples to apples? Did we take $15 million of the parish's money and put that into business as usual, like we did in the Ascension sewer model?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We did an apples to apples comparison as far as possible. But what we didn't do is assume that in the business as usual case, the 15.8 million was contributed to the parish, to the district directly. Now, the reality is, I guess, that by running a fiscal deficit and requiring parish support, then that 15.8 million is going in maybe implicitly, but we certainly haven't modeled a scenario where that 15.8 million is contributed as a capital sum, and then the balance is financed by the DEQ.
So if I remember correctly, the scenario that you had that had the least amount of loss was about $11 million loss. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's
so
right.
So the 15 million would have more than
covered
that.
Yeah. So if you assume that you contribute the $15.8 million, you assume the same starting customers as Ascension Sewer are assuming, you're assuming the same customer rate-based growth as Ascension Sewer is assuming, and you allow for a forecasting error of 20% on construction and operating costs, and the financing is 100% otherwise from DEQ, then you get pretty close to the $60.
Okay.
But that's a lot of
ifs.
A lot of ifs in there.
You said the customer base 3,058. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So I
and
may not be the best.
That's how many the parish has now.
I can't speak with any great authority on exactly how many. I know that around 2,100 are assumed in the business as usual case, and Ascension Sewer are assuming a little short of 3,000.
So there's 1,000, more or less 1,000.
Yeah, something like that.
Differential between the two assumptions. Where's the difference of that?
I think my understanding is that the Ascension Sewer example is relying on a subsequent and different study or estimate of the rate base as compared to business as usual, but I can't really talk to any more detail than that.
I mean, also, did I get this correct? There's is 3 and 2% versus 3 and 4% on the Ascension Sewer model.
Yeah, effectively the business as usual case is assuming, yes, exactly. So 2% increase in rate-based growth. The Ascension Sewer proposal is assuming 3%. And I think the logic there is that the district is, given that the system is upgraded but fundamentally unchanged in its core nature, they are less certain about being able to capture additional people from the individual systems as compared to the more advanced and easy to connect to solution.
So did you look at population growth in the parish?
No, we've taken.
So you didn't do anything to verify this 3% growth?
No, we haven't. No, we've taken it.
So if I told you that they've averaged less than 2% over the last few years, would that be surprising?
Not especially, because that's Well, the 2% is fairly consistent with the business as usual case, and I think.
Why would they put the growth rate a percent higher than what it's been over the last several years?
Well, I think that is a question for Ascension Sewer, who are probably better able to answer that than me. But my understanding, at least from the discussions that we've had with them, are because the rate level is being adjusted, and because the increased accessibility of the new system is such that they believe people will voluntarily choose to join the system over and above, whatever they're connected to now in terms of the individual
Are they
plans.
toilets gonna flush better?
Pardon?
Never mind. So if the growth rate is actually more like what it's been historically, then that's a rate reopener. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So
yeah.
if we grow it, or if they grow the customer base at what our average growth has been over the past several years, then we could look for a rate increase on the fee.
That's right. I think that would most likely be an increment over and above the 4% per annum. So I'm not sure they would necessarily need to affect the starting rate, but it would potentially affect the growth rate in indexed prices over time. Yeah.
So I'm going to switch over to this financial standing, and let me make sure I understand this correctly. So Bernard Capital Partners, they are contributing equity into Ascension Sewer.
Correct.
No different than me if I had the money, or somebody like Doc that has a lot of money, just taking that and investing that in the company. They are an investor, is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
So if Ascension Sewer, this new company that's formed, so what if they have a financial problem? Where does it tie back to Bernard Capital Partners, the people that have all the money?
Well, it depends what kind of financial problem we're talking about here. So and this is where the specifics of what risks are retained by the parish and what risks are transferred to Ascension Sewer is important, because theoretically the amount of equity that goes into this deal is at risk in the event that the project cannot generate enough cash to repay it. The principal risks that, at least in our judgment, Ascension Sewer bears are the ability to secure financing on the terms set out in the agreement, and the operating and performance risk of running the system, which isn't necessarily small. But what they don't bear in a material way right now, again, by our commercial read of the agreement, is risks connected to construction costs, overruns, or operating costs being.
So, I'm more talking about here financial standing. So, you said you looked at Bernard Capital Partners. Did you looked at them in the sense that they're capable of investing the equity that they promised to invest, $71 million? However, did you look at Ascension Sewer to say this is a company that normally when you do business or you do a large contract with somebody, you see what their wherewithal is. What's their balance sheet, for example, or these types of things, or what happens if they go bankrupt?
Yeah.
Then who picks up the tab there? Does it transfer? Do you ever get to touch the Bernard Capital Partner pot of gold?
It is not that straightforward so two things. One, have they got the money to put into this deal? And two, do they have a material risk of not getting it back? I think.
But I'm wondering contractually, is there a contractual connection between Ascension Sewer and Bernard Capital Partners that gives you a pathway if they default for some reason?
We haven't seen an equity contribution agreement or any of the financing agreements,
Okay.
and I'm not sure they exist right now.
Okay.
But the presumption would be that there would not be recourse back to the shareholders beyond the money that they've already put in.
So they would just
unusual.
lose the money that they have in, but if there were a liability issue, they wouldn't be held responsible for that.
Most likely not to any great degree. So their liability is most likely, and again, this is outside of any of the agreements, but if we were following normal P3 type practice, then their liability would be limited to the amount of money that they put in, the $70-odd million.
Okay. I'll jump around just a little bit if you don't mind, but we're talking about money, there's a $60 million in taxes that's in the pro forma. Is that just what, annual operating, profit minus, profit and loss, taxes? Is that what that is?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. It's taxes related to operating profits. And the reason it's structured in the way that it is because all the debt is front-loaded in terms of being repaid, then what
Okay.
that creates is quite a lot of taxable headroom at the back end, which then, yeah, as a tax-paying entity, they pay the tax. Now, the tax assumptions are, quite broad.
Was
but
that 60 million spread almost evenly over 30 years, or do you?
It's more felt towards the back end, so the
Okay.
second half of the project.
Okay.
Relatively little in the first half.
The model, I'm gonna have to go back. I'll try to repeat what you said about the model, which is that it's a financial model and it's not a rate-setting model, correct?
Correct.
And it's, I think there are several instances here in your report that say that you guys, I'll use the word recommend. I don't know that you use that, but I'll use that.
I don't think, it doesn't sound like a word I would use.
I understand that has a specific meaning for you, but I'm searching for a replacement word. But,
Yeah.
what you're saying is that you guys wish you would have seen a rate-generating model in there. Am I putting words in your mouth?
I think it would be helpful if there was one, yes.
Okay. And so this rate-generating model, and then you also, again, not recommended, you also thought it would be helpful if there were a mechanic to set the rates. Not a automobile mechanic, but a
Yeah.
mechanism to do
Yeah.
that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So there is a process in the contract which kind of sets out a sequential number of steps that people need to follow, but it doesn't provide a great deal of detail as to how. What data is going to be provided, what it should look like, what it's going to be referenced to, and what people are going to do with it. Now, there are two philosophies here. One is keep it broad and have a bilateral negotiation at the time, or try to remove
Which is
discretion.
what we have right now.
Yeah, which is what you have right now, or to try to create a more precise instruction manual, for want of a better word, to remove the latitude for bilateral negotiation as far as possible, so that it is the rules of the game are kind of well defined and understood at the start, so we don't have to kind of re-argue it every time.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but if you leave this broad, then you leave the possibility of, let's just take an example, and let's say that the construction costs go up 10 or 15%.
Yeah.
Outside the range of what they had. And so they come back to us and they say, you know what, this thing is $30 million more than we thought it would be, and so here's the rate increase to compensate for that. We say, you know what? I mean, you should have foreseen that. We don't think that's reasonable. So now, where do we go from there?
Arbitration.
Well, I think it's incumbent you to act reasonably. They have to act reasonably. If you can't reach agreement amicably, then there is again, lawyers will be able to talk to this more competently than me, but there is a dispute resolution process by which you can take
Everybody, each side picks one person and they argue for 15 days and then they go to non-binding arbitration, which is not binding by definition, and then where do we go?
I'll have to defer to my colleagues at Brazil on that, but I think it's court and ultimately that and sooner or later termination if the.
So tell me about the termination. What are the consequences of executing the termination clause?
Well, under the terms of the agreement, in the event of termination, then you get to keep obviously all the assets are yours. So everything that has been built or operated, barring a few pieces of mobile equipment, come back to you. AWT's customers remain your customers. Effectively, the utility is the parish's utility. But in return for that, you have to pay termination fee, which is ostensibly paying out any remaining senior debt, so that's the commercial loan. And if Ascension Sewer is the borrower of the DEQ loan, then that loan as well. And then you have to pay out equity as well, an equity return. So what that means is,
Do you have to pay the full equity return?
certainly if the default is yours. Now, where material failure to agree ends up, I'm not 100% sure.
Well, I mean, let's just summarize that and say you got to
Yeah.
pay $100 million plus. Is that pretty close?
It could be. It depends on when it happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if you end up in this disagreement after the commercial debt's been repaid, then it'll be a lot lower. If you end up in this disagreement really early, when all the debt's outstanding, it'll be higher.
Okay, so you talked about, this percent design that's completed. They're saying they're 30%, you guys are saying 5 to 10. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So, and the significance of that is, it's been a long time since I've done this project management work, but I remember some things. At a 5% design, we used to use 50% contingency. So I don't know, I mean, what are you guys saying, that if you're at 5% design, then what contingency do you use?
Well, I think, again, I have to defer to my colleagues at HNTB, but the advice that we've had from them is that, for the level of work that they've seen, whether it's 5, 10, 20, whatever it is, based on what they've seen, I think a 20% contingency would be appropriate.
So right now, where they are, they may be at 10 or some number
About
like
10,
that,
yeah.
percent design complete.
With a 10%
They're
contingency.
saying that there should be a 20% contingency on the construction cost.
Yeah, that would be, yeah.
Okay.
And we have a 10%, and as far as I know, Ascension Sewer has a 10% contingency.
So let's talk about the consequences of that. Is that, let's say that the construction is the best estimate is what, 220 million, roughly there?
Yeah.
And you say 20%, so what, 40-something million dollars that, and I saw some numbers bigger than that actually in the sensitivity, that it could be, upwards of 270 million, that high number here could be?
It's theoretically possible. We looked at indexation sensitivities as well. I don't know. I mean,
So-
to be honest, we are no better off predicting construction costs.
Well, yeah, I'm
costs at
just
this
trying
point
to,
than-
I'm trying
than
to
they are.
understand the effect on rates
Yeah.
that a $40 million plus increase in the construction costs would have. Right now, we don't have the capability to do that, but I mean, I would assume it'd be a fairly large number.
Yeah, it would be, yeah.
Now, let's go on the other side of that. So that's the avenue that we have if the construction costs go up, or that's the avenue that they have. So these are plus and minus sensitivities, correct? Contingencies. So let's say the construction costs go down by $40 million. So what do? They come put that money back in our coffers?
Not as currently drafted, no.
Right. So tell me what happens with that $40 million that's in addition to the what was forecast.
I think the contract is really silent on what happens to it. So the presumption would be that it stays with Bernhardt.
Stays with the people. So that puts their return up considerably, I guess. Okay. Same thing with schedule. I mean, we talked about these schedules not matching. So, a year delay in starting the construction. What does that mean to either the equity partners or the rates?
Well, a lot depends on exactly where the delay happens, for what reason, and what happens to costs in the intervening
Well, let's
period.
don't worry about why it happened. Let's just say that we're a year late starting the
They
construction.
were a year late starting, then that would then they would obviously earn a year's more rate revenue at the escalated rate, which would create a theoretical possibility of reducing the financing needs, which would then create potential upside. Now, if
Upside to not
to equity.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
if that delay also resulted in construction cost escalation because of inflation in the
Possible,
economy,
right.
then there's the question about what happens to that.
Well, then they could They could ask for a raise.
Theoretically, yes.
You're not gonna believe it, but that's all I have for now. Thank
That
you.
seems like a lot, that's plenty.
Oh, you sure?
Not completely.
Mr. Joseph,
No question, Doc.
Mr. Lawler.
Thank you. I don't have too many questions after that. The business as usual model, why did we start at 60 and not 57, whatever it is, 90 or?
I don't think the intent, and again, the district people will be better able to comment, I think the intent was to match precisely what Ascension Sewer were proposing, but rather to start at whatever their maximum acceptable rate was deemed to be, which in this case was 60.
Understandable. The concern, I guess, on the business as usual model, does this take into account any action by the federal government requiring us to take any action?
No.
This is assuming that everything goes well with all discharge levels and there's no consent decree or anything of that sort. Is that correct?
Believe, and again, and William will be able to talk to this better than I can, but my understanding is that it reflects a capital expenditure program capable of meeting the EPA's required discharge standards, albeit within the current configuration of the system.
I mean, personally, I see an obvious concern with not only the rate increase seems to be somewhat corresponding, not entirely, but somewhat corresponding with what Ascension Sewer would be proposing. Over 10 years, you'd reach close to the same rate increase, but the actual cost per customer would be high, and it's extremely high early on, which, am I correct that this actual cost per customer is basically another tax? Not another tax, it's using tax dollars from the general fund to pay for that.
Yeah, effectively, if you are going to spend that money, it has to come from somewhere.
Somewhere.
Yeah,
It's always the taxpayer.
yeah, that's the.
I mean, obviously, I think, in my humble opinion, we can't do business as usual, especially not in the long term. But I don't know if this is the right plan right now. Now, Councilman Dawson asked a lot of great questions. Going back to the construction, though. So if there's I'm concerned about the construction costs and the variabilities that come with all of that. Is there a potential that the Ascension Sewer could walk away from it if the construction costs get up too high?
Again, this is probably a question better answered by legal advisors. I guess that it would be a matter for the rate setting process and,
Yes.
and that dispute resolution process, because I think ultimately, it's certainly the way that Ascension Sewer have articulated this is that, you know, they believe that they have made a sensible assessment and prudent provision for the capital works. They have some latitude as to the rate and scale at which they connect people into the system if costs are running higher or faster than they currently predict. So it's a slightly, so it has the potential to be a slightly self-correcting situation. So I think ultimately this is going to come back to how far can those costs be effectively mitigated and controlled through actions that can be taken by Ascension Sewer. And if there's a limit to how far that can go, then it's going to go to the rate mechanism, I suspect.
Any cap on the actual amount of rate increase that can be sought?
No.
Is that common that you'd see a cap, or is that something that is generally not seen?
I think different contracts deal with this issue in different ways, and I would say that, again, the data set is pretty small. From a investor-owned utility model, then clearly there's a PUC or a PSC type process to stress test, and then there is a decision about environmental performance and cost of service, and the right balance is struck. Here, because we have a very large greenfield component in terms of new build infrastructure, it's not really a stable going concern utility in that sense. In other concession type P3 deals, there have been and there are mechanics by which if the municipal entity cannot or will not increase rates to meet the requirements of the P3 contract, then the P3 contractor can have recourse to other revenues from the municipality. So whether that be general fund or other sources of revenue to meet its requirements. So more often than not, P3 contractors are very wary about rate setting ability because their solvency depends on getting the rates they need to run the system properly, and if they can't get those, then they have a serious problem. So in this particular case, Ascension Sewer aren't seeking any other recourse back to the parish as a municipal entity for loss, failure to achieve rates. It is, it is taking risk on you guys agreeing rates, which, not all P3 contractors are prepared to do.
But, I mean, I understand that there's a risk there, but I think we've already decided eventually it's going to get to the attorneys and get to a lawsuit, and that's where this would go anytime that there's a dispute about whether or not there's justification to deny a rate increase. And that just concerns me because at that point, we've lost all control to set a rate increase, and it ultimately comes back on the taxpayer and the ratepayer. Is that how you see this happening? I know you can't see the future. You don't have a crystal ball.
You're right. I can't see the future. I don't know about that. I mean, again, I can't really comment on the lawsuit and legal action. I think it suits, in my experience, both parties to have a reasonably clear set of rules that defined at the outset to avoid people feeling that everyone interprets the contract differently at the time when it matters most. But I think the reality is these costs are uncertain. They're uncertain in the business as usual case. They're uncertain in the Ascension Sewer case. And until substantive work is done on design and construction procurement, they're going to stay, uncertain. And just because they're uncertain doesn't necessarily make that Ascension Sewer's fault, or your fault either, obviously. It is just the reality of not having a fully designed solution ready to go. So I think just because costs increase doesn't mean it's not legitimate. The key is having a process which makes sure that those cost increases are defensible, and you as the rate setting entity have enough data to be confident that A, the rate increase is justified, and B, the underlying costs are translating into that rate in the right sort of way.
I mean, kind of like Bill, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I think he alluded to also, I think you said something about complete design. I'm not expecting a complete design, but a more substantial design would allow us less uncertainty. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, that's certainly the experience of at least my experience of P3 type projects is, you get a reasonable degree of certainty between 30 and 50% design, and most contractors are able to commit to a firm fixed price at around 60% design. So, or expecting Ascension Sewer or anybody else to commit to a fixed price before they get to that kind of level of design is not realistic.
Yeah, there's just a lot of concern on my part as far as unknown liabilities, and that kind of tails into my next question. Ascension Wastewater has a lot of, I know people have been through this before, but a lot of properties outside the parish. By my last count, it looks like there are 25 total. I didn't see anything in Iberville Parish, but that may be incorrect. I just looked on their website. There are 11 in East Baton Rouge, 14 in Livingston. Do we have any analysis of the condition of those plants, and if they're going to need, future costs that eventually is going to be, that money's going to come from our ratepayers, including those people? No, don't get me wrong. But was there any analysis of those plants, the cost of those and their condition?
No, we just didn't get into that granularity. We've looked at it at a kind of aggregate level.
That's all the questions I have for right now.
Ms. Castle?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for the time you spent with me today. I appreciate it. Did you test the sensitivity of the loss of the $60 million DEQ loan to the parish should we proceed with the BAU?
No, we did not specifically. So the BAU case was primarily either self-funded, and then as the sort of the more as one of the sensitivities, we assumed that the BAU case could be funded by the DEQ loan, but we haven't done any analysis to determine whether that's achievable or not. It was a financial sensitivity to look at potential rate impact.
So the other gentleman asked such thorough questions that I certainly don't think I have any more at this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, before we see if we can have a second round and/or move on to the next speaker, again, I, like this committee, want to thank you, Mr. Smith and your company for the excellent work you've done. I want to start with BAU like Councilman Dawson did, and sort of pick up on his comments about apples and oranges, but in a little different vein. The BAU case, the business as usual case, does it consider, even at the end of, say, whatever it is, the 20-year or 30-year period, having an actual modern-day tertiary sewer plant on the Mississippi River, as well as pipes in the airline airline highway to connect both Highway 42 and 73, as well as piping south of 73 to go to that plant, which engenders, of course, right-of-way acquisition costs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
The honest answer is I'm not 100% sure. I would have to defer to
I'm sure we'll get to it later.
But I don't believe so.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it doesn't.
Yeah, no, it certainly doesn't include the big plan. What?
So what we're saying, when we say, it was formerly referred to as the do-nothing case, or I guess by our in-house folks, and you've called it, I like that, business as usual. Yeah. It's not apples and oranges, because, I mean, we're not going to be 20, 30 years from now, at least I don't have any belief structure, that the DEQ or any federal watchdog agency or state watchdog agency in this case is going to still be totally happy with us and have not come down on our heads with either a consent decree and or whatever's going to happen. Yeah. And, of course, during that time, I think you'd be crazy, not any of us, to believe that they're going to increase the standards of the water quality going along, which is not considered, because, again, it's no crystal ball. You don't know what those changes might be if and when and you won't know when they come into existence and so forth. So it's a pretty sticky wicket, wouldn't you agree?
No, I would. I think business as usual is one term for it, but I mean, you are kind of mending and making do. So you're not.
So without pushing
a big treatment plant.
Using Councilman Lawler's words, without trying to put words in your mouth, without pushing you, do you think the $27 million on BAU is conservative? It could be just like the other side of the coin, much, much higher. Yeah. If we don't do anything. Yeah. Much higher.
It could be. I mean, it's not a costed, market-tested, technical solution.
And let's face it, in reality, I know you work with all you had. It's really fuzzy math, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think people have done the best they can with the data they've got. But
and I'm not taking a swing at what they supplied to you in-house or what you did with it and analyses that you conducted post hoc, but
there's a lot of uncertainty.
So uncertainty on both sides. All right, question number 2. How much angst does not having construction contractor on board at this point cause you? And do you have a short-term remedy, or is that's not a deal breaker for you? Or, and maybe let me rephrase, because I know you're not going to answer it. Let's just stick with how much angst does that give you, and do you have a remedy? Is there something we could put into an amended document that would be helpful there?
I think there are. Let me think about this. I think at the point when the contract is signed, Ascension Sewer will be equally concerned to have a creditworthy and substantial construction contractor working for it.
Because they don't want to waste their money either.
No, and if they don't have a good construction contractor, they're not going to be able to raise the commercial debt, which is their risk.
So really, our trust is in that they would select someone that knows how to actually do the build, the physical build.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
can do whatever the design engineers say, you know, this is the capacity of the plant, it's supposed to operate using the Venturi system, throw salt over your shoulders, spit in the wind and pull a mask on the old Long Range or whatever it's going to be. Is that not correct?
Yeah, there's an element of trust in that. Now, as a condition precedent to financing, the existence of a creditworthy construction contractor satisfactory to the lenders will be in that list of things that have to be in place before financing can be released. The contract is somewhat silent on what happens if those conditions precedent can't be met. So there is, I think, scope to create a more precise environment where people have to, there's a solution to an intractable inability to make progress at that point. But I think everyone's incentives will be pretty well aligned at that point, because this project can't go forwards without a good construction.
I think you've answered it. Doesn't give you great angst, just some concern. And I find throughout your report, and I understand that's what you have to do. Your job is to poke holes in things. As if Councilman Johnson was here sitting on the end, that's what he'd be saying our job is too.
Yeah.
So that, and I saw a lot of language like it would be prudent for the council to consider this. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to obviously be prudent and all. Number 3, and I'm going to quote, you said that the, quote, rate case analyses were difficult for your company to do based on what Ascension Sewer LLC supplied. Do you have a remedy and quick fix for that going forward?
Yeah, I don't think it would be that difficult to refine the financial model that Ascension Sewer have to make it more straightforward for the purposes of this and future analysis to justify rate increases.
So we may not have to reinvent the wheel there, but we
No,
could
I-
maybe add some language.
Yeah.
Okay. Number, wherever we are, 4 or 5. Unquote, you said there was no clear, I love that word, mechanic, for upgrading to a, quote, rate model, unquote, concept. Again, can such a mechanic be developed, and again, fairly quickly, before we sink this battleship, if we do
Yeah.
that?
Yes, absolutely.
And your company would be capable of assisting with that process as well?
Yeah, I think there's 2 aspects to this.
Or another third party, or?
Yeah, absolutely. It could be, there's the financial model, which is the anchor point for the current and future rate analysis, and then there is the mechanic or enhancement to the process that's already in the contract to provide a greater degree of specificity as to how that model will be used and what each party will do with it and when. Precedent exists for that. It wouldn't be difficult to construct.
Okay. Ascension Sewer LLC says 30%, and we've talked about this, design at this stage. Ernst & Young, your company's estimate may be somewhere around 5 or 10%. And this relatively, quoting you, early stage of cost estimates for both design, and you made a similar statement, the early stage of, cost development in operating cost, could result, possible, in Ascension Sewer LLC coming, as Bill Dawson and others have said, to us and saying we want/need an increase in rates from what's in this CEA. Again, remedy, quick-term solution. If, for example, let's just say Ascension Sewer LLC is willing to add language to the contract that would deal with protections against overruns within the cost and design of construction for all of the various new construction projects, as well as maybe adding to our C&O contract language, including if the cost or actually the other side of the coin that Bill mentioned and you expounded upon, or below budget, such costs would be, assuming they'd be willing, let's say, invested back into the system. That's doable as well?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And that would be for both, as I said, design and operating cost. There's the word again. You said the current mechanic, there's no description, of outcomes if we have this positive unexpected, let's say, decrease in both design and operating cost on one or the other, if not both. And currently, the CEA reads that Ascension Parish customer rates could go down, but it doesn't read that way. It could be that way. But right now, if it's silent on that, using your words, ASLLC could get a higher return on investment. And I'm not interested in giving them more profit than they fairly deserve, which I hope is somewhere around the 8%. But with language, we could probably also, correct me if I'm wrong, remedy, for the camera's sake, you nod in your head.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
that could be remedied. These are all all different facets of the same issue, which is rate setting in a transparent and equitable way.
Okay, last but not least, I guess, if Ascension Sewer LLC is able to secure, you talked about this long-term commercial debt as opposed to the way they currently plan to finance this, there's again no mechanic to convey the positive results that would have to Ascension Parish. But with proper language, could we not address that as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to stop there for round one and invite any committee member before we go to the next speaker. Would they like a second round? This time we'll start. So we went to my right. We'll go to my left. Ms. Gasso. Round two, dear.
I'm trying to,
We can come back to you once
you
sometime.
please
okay?
come back to me. I'm trying to
Right.
make sure I
Mr. Lawler?
get this right.
No, I think you covered the whole rate decrease concept pretty well.
Thank you. OJ. Mr. Dawson, round two.
Maybe one.
Go for it. Real quick, huh?
That's Randy saying.
We're gonna miss
real
him.
quick.
Sorry to keep you up so long. But let's, I think, more in line of, first I'd like to ask, you said earlier when we were talking about the risk being asymmetrical. Can you explain that a little bit?
I think it's pretty much what we've just covered in that there are opportunities to increase rates for reasonably and properly incurred costs, but the contract is silent on the ability to mitigate rate increases where things turn out better than expected. And sort of a symmetrical risk environment would be that for those risks that the parish or ratepayer are bearing, then they should, if things turn out better, they should take the benefit of that. And for those risks that Ascension Sewer is bearing, they should take the risks and rewards, those issues turning out differently from expected. So that's what I mean by
Okay.
symmetry.
So if we said that's obviously problematic, that, the reward tends to lean to them and the risk tend to lean to us, then I have a couple of bullets here that I would like to go over with you and see if we, if this would mitigate some of that and move us more towards a symmetrical risk reward than the asymmetrical that, I think we both feel like we're at now. Which number one would be to initiate or to bring the design to at least a level that reduces the sensitivity to plus or minus 10%. That's not saying that, maybe it's 20%, maybe it's 30% design, but the sensitivity or the contingency should be no greater than 10%. Do you agree that would reduce our risk?
If risk, in the context of the extent to which outcomes are hard to predict or unexpected, then yes, clearly the higher the level of design, the lower the level of uncertainty of outturn costs.
Yeah. So, I think we went over that several times in the document, is that, because we have these uncertainties in the design, that's what gives us these high sensitivities to the rate increases. What if we were to, as Councilman Satterley said, maybe you guys or somebody that's capable of this, doing this rate generating model?
Yep, I
And-
think that would help. I think it would be properly done by Ascension Sewer as the owners of their model and the anchor point for that process, but it would be reviewed and agreed by somebody appropriate on your side.
And then the third one I have is to put language in the agreement to specifically outline how rates will be adjusted or set in accordance with the rate generating model. Rates should be able to move either up or down.
Yep, that seems sensible.
And the last thing that I have is just to, at one point, page 13 of your document, you talk about transparency and year-end reporting, and you know, again, that's something else that I agree with you on, that appears to be, you know, not that much year-end reporting of where they stand with their cash, where they stand with their reserve, et cetera.
Yeah, I think the latest iteration of the CNO agreement does address some of that.
Okay.
So I think we're moving in the right direction.
Okay. So let me ask this. If we improved all of these to these points that I talked about, do you think, you know, I mean, let me preface this. At this point, I think the contract is way too asymmetrical, to use your word, or it leans way too much the risk towards us and the reward towards them, for me to agree to it. And, you know, as I read your evaluation of it, that's how I formed that opinion. So if we could take and institute these 3 or 4 steps, that brings up the design level to where the contingencies are lower. Secondly, have this rate generating model. Thirdly, to put something in the contract on how the rates are going to be adjusted. You know, do you think that the model would be satisfactorily symmetrical at that point?
Yes, I do.
I don't have anything.
Terry, are you prepared now, or I can go?
It's okay. It worked out.
Okay, well, so for my part of round 2, I promised, and so I'll deliver on that, and there'll probably be a question yet still for you, Mr. Smith, sir, so we'll ask you to be patient, stay at the mic. I would be a gatekeeper of our speaker card people this afternoon. That's Councilman Cluott and President-elect Clint Quintmaw, and also I'm going to make a comment, too, on something that William Daniel said before you took the mic. Quoting from Councilman Cluott, he admonished us to, quote, "Don't wait," he said, "till the new council is seated, because, quote, we've been working on this since the 1990s. He even talked about a good effort that also failed in 2001. And he concluded with, we have a reasonable, if not good, proposal actually in front of us. I'll say this about that. I've served for 8 years. In a month from now, I will be no longer serving. During that 8-year period, I have seen 5 blushing brides go to the altar, and all of them been stood up by the groom. Integra comes to mind, P16, modified P16, Essential Environmental, which was a public-private partnership, not even the hybrid we have in front of us, which number 5 is Ascension Sewer. And historically, I agree with Councilman Cluott, if we go back to the historical famous 1993 meeting between then President Tommy Martinez and Mr. Shaheen from GSA, I've been told over and over that it was concluded back then, that's 26 years ago, that we will never have sewer regional or parish-wide in this parish without some sort of public-private partnership, and/or, as we have in front of us now, an investor-utility hybrid public-private partnership. Hope I adequately covered what Mr. Cluott had to say. Mr. Quintmaw, he admonished us to, quote, be patient, unquote, and to continue to negotiate, quote, unquote, this contract. I think that's exactly what we're trying to do tonight when I use terms like, you know, should we torpedo the battleship, or can we still salvage this, whatever. We have done 8 hard years of work, many of those years under the leadership of Councilman Johnson, who's unfortunately not here tonight, Randy Cluot, who is, and as you can see, is still battle testing himself, not being on the committee, but coming to the mic. And then my 1 year of assuming a leadership role, 2019, as the chair of utilities. So I hope Clint understands that that's what we're trying to do. Be patient. We want to still negotiate if we can. Clint also talked about the uncertainty of rate setting, and he's spot on there as well, just like Councilman Dawson and others have alluded to. He said he would like to see a mechanism. He wants a mechanism. He said potentially modeled by a professional organization. I just asked you moments ago, could we do that with you guys, another third party, whatever, and you answered in the affirmative. So hopefully we can get that model. Actually, about the only thing I disagree with Clint on is when he said that the parish risk is one-sided, and Ascension Parish almost is assuming 100% of the risk. I don't believe that. Are you willing to say that, sir?
No, I don't think you're assuming 100% of the risk.
So it's very possible that maybe these guys have even made a mistake to come to us and want to do anything at all. They could lose. I mean, we talked about what happens if they go bankrupt and what happens to this and how does that end and all. The very fact that we're talking about it, there's got to be some risk on their side, right?
Yeah, and I think, the point I would make is we're obviously very focused on costs, being financial people, but at the end of the day, they are running a wastewater system in accordance with applicable laws, which is pretty integral to the purpose of the transaction.
Okay. We're going to stop there, and let's see. You want a third round?
I'm willing to make a motion.
I was going to hurt him.
You don't want to hear the other speakers first?
I'd like to make a motion.
That's your pleasure, sir.
So I'd like to make a motion that we approve this, sending the C&O agreement to the full council with the following provisions. Initiate a contract to bring the design to at least the level that reduces the sensitivity to plus or minus at least 10%. See bullet 2 under the non-construction costs on page 47 of the Ernst & Young report. The parish will pay for the additional design, will negotiate to pay for the additional design at a reimbursable rate. This work should include a timeline, schedule with dependencies that shows typical detail of engineering, construction, and operation, and include generally what package plants and which individual treatment plants by area will be connected. Have a third party, possibly Ernst & Young, prepare a rate generating model that is done according to a specification agreed to by both parties. See the last paragraph of page 33 of the ENY document. Put language in the C&O agreement to specifically outline how rates will be adjusted or set in accordance with the rate generating model. Rates should be able to move either up or down. See page 52 of the ENI document under initial rates could be reduced. Address the recommendations in the Ernst & Young evaluation regarding transparency, that is, annual and quarterly reports by changing the C&O agreement. See page 13 of the NY document under C&O agreement. After all of the above is completed, send modified C&O agreement and rate generating model back to Ernst & Young for review, then for public comment, then to the Utilities Committee.
Okay, it's been moved that, and I'm not going to repeat that, although I have a copy, and I believe everyone has a copy distributed to them up here. Is that not correct, committee members? So to facilitate discussion, being mindful that a second to any motion means we just want more discussion. You don't necessarily support that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Mr. Lawler's going to second. Okay, so now we're back to discussion again. And before doing that, since we're making motions and not having the rest of the speakers up here, we do want to hear from them, and eventually we'll get to you guys. Be patient with us. I would like to offer an amended motion to Mr. Dawson's motion, and my amendment would simply only deal with his first bullet and leave the second, third, fourth, and fifth one intact as he read them, okay? And the first bullet that he had, I'd like to replace it with something that would say along the lines that we recommend adding additional language to the C&O agreement to protect against overruns within the cost of design and construction of the various new construction projects that are proposed. All that being added to the C&O contract, including if costs are below budget, such cost would be invested back into the system. And I'll ask if we can get a second for that.
I can give you a second for that, sir.
Okay, so it's been moved and second that we have that as an amended motion. So now we're back to discussion again. There are two motions on the table. The precedent motion right now for voting purposes is the amended motion, but before doing that, the chair would like to give the other individuals who came here tonight the opportunity to speak, who are on both the other side of the table, if you will, as well as our side. In your packets, it's listed Gavin Fleming, Utilities Director, and that could be, I guess, NR Mr. William Daniel, Mr. Jeff Bodier, and I believe Mr. Jenkins, his associates with him tonight from Ascension Sewer. And last but not least, Messrs. Tim Hardy and David Fleshman from Brazil, Soxy, and Wilson. So I guess we'll start with our in-house folks. Gavin and William, you guys are on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Appreciate y'all's patience to go over this tonight. I do think it's important that we spend as much time discussing it as is reasonable. I wanted to point out, we talked about a 2% growth rate in our model and why they used a 3% in the contract and operating agreement. I want to point out that that's completely apples and oranges, that our 2% growth rate is actually, we're adding customers based on an actual growth rate, whereas the contract and operating agreement calls for adding 3% more customers per year. It doesn't have really anything to do with the growth rate. So that's a big difference in our model and the actual construction and operating agreement. I think that Ernst & Young did a pretty good job of describing our model. It is, we do talk about financing everything up front. That's not, we don't have to do that. We could go borrow the money and do it. That would only make the model more pessimistic in the long run because we'd be having to pay interest costs. We're putting $4 to $5 million a year into the sewer and water construction fund, so we just thought it would be more prudent to use that. Second, if we don't, the business as usual model, by definition, is we don't build a sewer plant. If we don't build a sewer plant, then we fall under the DEQ very stringent discharge conditions. That's why we will have to go in and refurbish every single plant that the parish operates. And we'll spend millions of dollars doing that. But we can, I do believe, take those plants and make them meet the discharge requirements. The problem is after spending those millions of dollars to do that, we will still have sewer in the ditch and all the related problems that come with sewer in the ditch. We'll still have the drainage issues. We'll have to be out digging our ditches because of the increased amount of solids that we put in them. And additionally, we'll have to do a lot more grass cutting because we're fertilizing the grass with the effluent as well. So, but otherwise, I thought that the model, as discussed by Ernst Young, was fair, other than those caveats that I just mentioned. And we'd be happy to answer any questions that y'all might have. Did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, I was going to just help reiterate some of the questions that y'all did ask. Were There is, like the Riverton project that y'all approved the increase for the permitting cost, that money is figured in that, but that is still treating a small little group to go into, once again, a small package plan. There is a little bit of cost associated with tertiary filters that is in this one.
I think, Mr. Chairman, you asked the question, would we build a plant on the Mississippi River? And the answer is, we couldn't afford to build a plant on the Mississippi River because we would never accumulate enough customers to be able to afford the cost of building a line and then a plant to the Mississippi River.
And I would just say, thank you for saying that, because it reminds me of, before your tenure, sir, an in-house engineer, I believe it was maybe Mr. Horner, was tasked with a similar thing to do when we're back in the P16 days, in the modified P16, an assessment, and his conclusion was, you just don't have enough customers unless you have AWT's customers. And that, of course, precipitated historically, for those that aren't aware, Ascension Environmental's triple P, where we're at the table with that. Without customers, you're not putting lines in and you're not building plants. And to me, that's a huge risk going down the line. I didn't say this, but that 1993 triple P Envision project by Martinez, then President Martinez and Glenn Shaheen, envisioned parish-wide, not even regional like we're doing here. So that would be MODAD, septics, and all of the AWT customers and density and all the others that do business in our parish. $100 million, 1993. That's now set at, we learned that in the Central Environmental with other due diligence there, both in-house and with hired guns. It's closer to $1 billion and rising. I just, and I'll make one more comment again with something that Mr. Kluot said that really pushed a button with me. David Mitchell asked me after the Donaldsonville meeting, those for the not aware people out there, that's the beat report writer for Ascension for the Advocate. So, Doc, why don't we just wait and let the new council come in here and do this? That's what everybody wants and says needs to be done, etc. My comment, unfortunately, did not get translated into the press, word for word, so I'll give it again. I do not believe the people of D4 elected me in 2015, and prior to that, in 2011, serving on the Utilities Committee for, as I said, 8 years, the last year of which I've had a leadership role, to abdicate my responsibility to, and this is nothing against the freshman class, but the newcomers coming in. He did publish something to the effect that Doc said, and I kind of said something after, and I kind of knew he'd probably print that. I wasn't elected for 3 years, 8 months, 10 months, or whatever it is. Caught me off guard. I was elected for 4 years. And a good example of that will be at Thursday night's strategic planning meeting, chaired by Mr. Joseph. We're going to be considering whether or not we make the Planning Commission advisory in nature to us in their decisions on approvals and denials of subdivision plats, similar to they do in zoning decisions. We could easily say, hey, let's let the next group decide that. Well, I personally and others worked hard on it, including the obtaining of an Attorney General's opinion that states we can do that if we so decide. It will require altering our homeroom charter, but I'm glad to see it's on the agenda and we will consider it. I'm a further go out on a little bit of a limb, I don't think too far. Ms. Casso has said when she became our chairman of the full council for this last calendar year, I do not want to be a lame duck consul. We will bring a fill ordinance, check. We will do an animal services board to take care of this tax that's coming up for the first time, the so-called animal control carrot tax, check. We will do sewer, not quite a check yet, is it? So I hope everybody tonight sincerely is going to vote at least one of these two motions forward to our full council as a recommendation. That's all we are. This don't mean it's going to happen, or anybody jumps up and down and cheers one way or another, but to give everybody a vote. I might also say that Councilman Kluart, when he made his decision not to run again for this council, and Mr. Melanson in the audience is now going to assume his duties and responsibilities in that district, okay? He said, Doc, do me one favor before I hang up my spurs. I said, Randy, what's that? Give me the opportunity to vote up or down on sewer, and I am heck bent to do that. Next, we'll have,
May I make one final comment, and then I'll go sit down, and you won't hear from me again the rest of the night, I promise.
you don't need to do that. I mean, the comment's going to be fine, but you can come back up anytime you want, Mr. Daniel, but go ahead.
Well, we talked a lot, or we listened a lot about the sensitivity analysis that was being done. We did a sensitivity analysis on this, although it's harder to put on paper. The sensitivity analysis, we will never build our own treatment plant with the customers as we're acquiring them. The only way that this can be done, and I don't think I'm revealing any closely held secret, is to have AWT as a partner. If we decide for whatever reason, and I'm against business as usual, but y'all are the decision makers, and we're just here to assist you in making the best decision that you can for the parish. If for whatever reason you make a recommendation and it doesn't get voted on by the council, I can see somebody else coming in, making a deal with AWT and building a private sewer system. Now, you'll generally get, I think, a similar type of model. I mean, it's not rocket science where it's got to be built and where you're going to go to on the Mississippi River. The major difference will be you will be basically ceding control of all rate-making ability to the Public Service Commission. So I would hope that whatever final contract you come up with, that you figure out a way to keep the rate-making control within the parish. That's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. We'll now hear from Brazil, Soxy, and Wilson. Mr. Hardy or Mr. Fleischman, if you would like, or do you want to pass? You have, I guess what I would ask this, have we said anything that has disrupted the apple cart on the legal aspects that we employed your firm to look at?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, no. We retained Ernst & Young because of their expertise. We don't disagree with anything. They said we yield to their expertise. On the last time, you heard an exhaustive presentation by David Fleischman of my firm. Nothing considerable has changed since that time. A few minor tweaks, but nothing I think you want to go through tonight. So with that, unless there are some specifics, we will pass.
Okay, and Mr. Hardy, you're referring for the record, I could show the PowerPoint presentation given last time by your associate, by David?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right, okay. Any questions for BSW? All right, we're going to move to our final speaker before calling the question or having further discussion and then call a question. Jeff Baudier, Ascension Sewer, and/or Mr. Jenkins, I see you here as well. Gentlemen, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Jeff Jenkins with Barnhart Capital, associated with Ascension Sewer. And one of the things I'll say, reflecting on being here tonight, is I couldn't ever be more excited about the potential to invest in Ascension Parish. You guys hired a first-rate consultant. You've done a significant amount of due diligence, and you've addressed, I can't imagine that there's another issue. Now, what's a little bit unorthodox is, having been in my position before, it's usually normal that we do a lot of this discussion behind the scenes once the consultant comes up with the report, and we have an opportunity to identify those issues that are clear opportunities where we can come to mutual agreement. So I think basically what I've heard is I haven't heard one thing that I don't believe we could all come to agreement on. The most important issue for us, just like we do with thousands of customers we have on our service business is have happy customers and happy clients. Well, in this case, the clients are the rate base, the rate payers. And a lot of the risk we're talking about are risks that will ultimately be borne by the rate payers. And we live right down the road. I grew up in Jefferson. I can't tell you how many times I've driven through this parish to Baton Rouge, spent more time in Baton Rouge than I have now in Metairie. But seeing this parish grow, know people who live here, employ thousands of people who live in this community through our businesses. And so as we think about a major investment and risking a significant amount of capital, you know, we don't take it lightly in terms of who we deal with. And I'll just say it again, I couldn't be more excited about the opportunity to partner with a group of people that have taken this matter so seriously, not just for the parish, but also for the ratepayers themselves. If I could just address a couple of items, there are only a few slight items where we have a little disagreement. One is on the design. As many of you know, we come from the engineering and construction business. We've known the group of people who have been working on this project for a long period of time. I've personally been involved in billions of dollars of investments in construction in the water and wastewater business while I was associated with the Shaw Group. And I feel very, very confident in where we are on the cost estimates. And it's one of the reasons we didn't address an up or a down. Now, what we are definitely willing to do is address an up or a down. If it goes down, we're happy to guarantee that it goes into the cost of additions for the system. And if it goes up, we're willing to look at taking risks there because, again, working with AWT, Mr. Shaheen, GSA, multiple parties, having 3 different construction companies look at the construction and what the cost is, understanding that it's fairly simple in terms of what we're looking, even though it's a big number, it's fairly simple in terms of what we're looking to invest. And then also adjusting for those time frames. The other matter that I think is included but was picked up very well by Ernst & Young is that, you know, we consider the model that we use to be a rate-making model. When we think about municipal utilities, most do exactly what this commission does. It's different from what the Public Service Commission does. There's not a big buildup of cost plus a rate of return. It's basically like we discussed and was offered up here, how can we be competitive in the marketplace with surrounding communities and still build the infrastructure we want to do? That's what they do in Jackson, Mississippi. That's what they do in San Marcos, Texas. That's what they do in Nashville, Tennessee. That's what they do at 2,500 water and wastewater utilities across the country that we've had the privilege of working with. And so I think to the point, it would be very, not simple, but very somewhat simple to take the process we have for how the rates are made, make some adjustments in working with someone like Ernst & Young, and set a model up for a more certain model of what those rates would be. I know there were several other items that were discussed, but again, I think those are the major ones. Again, I didn't hear one thing, whether it's the timing and delays in terms of making adjustments for those, not a problem. I think what's important to really think about with respect to the investment that we're making is we see ourselves stepping into your shoes. We see these ratepayers being our clients. It's one of the reasons why we didn't take a typical P3 model and add on a lot of leverage to this business and put more risk than we should put on this business. This is a utility. It deserves a certain amount of comfort. It means we need to decide on a certain ratio for leverage so that there aren't outsized returns. We're very comfortable with that because from day one and talking to people about what our rates are, we said that we were going to be competitive in the marketplace with what others do in regulated utilities. Excuse me, and I think by this report, that's exactly what it shows. So a little bit odd to kind of have some of this discussion kind of out in the open, but I think, again, it's one of the reasons why I think it's refreshing because the transparency is good for all of us. The transparency is good, most importantly, for the rate makers, the rate payers, and that's ultimately who's going to be paying the bills and who we're going to be stewards for, and so they deserve the information. So I really appreciate everything this council has done. I appreciate the time and effort that you've spent with us, the investment that you've made in bringing on professionals like Ernst & Young and HNTB and Brazil Saxe, and for really giving us the opportunity to help potentially solve your issues. So I'll leave it with that.
Stay there for a minute, Mr.
Okay.
Jenkins. Two quick things, one an observation and another just a comment. These guys we retained were expensive.
They always are, but
I
they're
had
worth
someone
it.
say to me just recently, you know, we approved just this afternoon, what was it, another $300,000 bill in your committee on top of what we already have to continue legal engineering and, in this case now, the financial aspects from E&Y. The comment is this. So, I learned this in diversity training and active listening, okay? If I heard you right, Mr. Jenkins, are you saying that your group, Bernhard Capital Partners, you know, AKA the Consortium of Ascension Sewer LLC, are willing to work yet with Ascension Parish and Ernst & Young or whoever we identify to fulfill the 5 bullets of Mr. Dawson's original motion made here tonight that would be on the table if we don't pass my amended motion, which only alters the first bullet, in time for a council vote, which would be the second meeting in November of 2019. Did I hear you right?
Well, I heard everything you said. I think I would agree more with the first bullet in terms of what we would propose, which would be to work with Ernst & Young to identify risk sharing for
So as
that
opposed to
potential
the plus
cost,
or
as
minus,
opposed to
the
plus or
10%
minus, 'cause
sensitivity.
Again, we feel pretty firm we're already there. We're willing to put our money where our mouth is.
But you would be willing, for example, if Ernst & Young recommended language to at least consider that language, that if there's a positive, we invest it back into the system.
Yes, absolutely.
All that stuff that I said.
Absolutely. So we think that would be a better method than trying to go to some additional design, again, just because we're confident enough that we're already there. So, for example, as we talk about.
And of course, working with them
on.
on a rate model system, the other parts of the bullets that Mr. Dawson has in there.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I think the only other one I heard was maybe coming back to this
Well,
committee, which is fine by us, whatever your
We'll get
pleasure
clarity on
is.
the motion in a minute. I right now don't see a need for that, but perhaps, I mean, it's whatever I just orchestrate things here.
Sure.
But it's what the will of this committee will be heard tonight.
And I think it's beyond those, and I think that's, we can identify those, but, there were
And
comments
I'll
made
go on
by
record
the
again. I know
elected
Ms.
parish
Casso.
president and, others that should be incorporated. So, my
Right.
opinion, all the discussion tonight can be incorporated in a very short time frame, working with Ernst & Young to come to solutions that give not just you all, but the ultimate rate payers a great sense of confidence in moving forward with this. type of
Let me
project.
just make this pledge again for the umpteenth time, and I know Ms. Casso did at the full council level. As chair of this committee, if we need a special meeting yet before the council would have vote, we can do so when these language changes that are being proposed in this amended motion, or if the other motion passes, whichever the case may be, occurs. And I would say, Ms. Castle, you probably haven't backed off on your stance to continue this process at the full council level post, if the motion tonight's going to be, you asking does it go directly or not?
Oh, no, I just, I didn't fully hear it, to be honest with you. I just
Y'all
heard
not running
something
away.
about
You're
coming
not
back
picking
here,
up all
so-
your marbles and say, that's it, I've had it. Okay. All right, so we thank you, sir, and we'll now have discussion. The amended motion is on the table before we vote, and we'll start again with Mr. Dawson.
I'm in favor of my motion, which is not the amended motion.
So your discussion is you'd be probably a negative vote. Mr. Joseph, do you have anything further to add, sir?
I heard the gentleman right. Everything that Bill have on here is up to discussion, so right now I'm in favor.
Mr. Lawler?
Yeah, I hate to bring up some things late, but I think it kind of touched on all of the speakers in our own way and really on this council. I think one of the things we also need to look at is the sewer hookup fees. We have a lot of low income, we have a lot of fixed income individuals that are going to need hookups, sewer hookups. So I think the council needs to look at either some sort of reduced cost or low term, and we're going to work with Ascension Sewer on this. I would hope they would work with us, whether it be long-term financing at low or no interest, reduce cost. Is that something that we can also, I don't know if it has to be in this motion, but it definitely has to be part of this. I know I was talking to a couple of individuals, half hour before this, and that's one of the biggest concerns, is we've got a lot of people on MODADs that aren't gonna be able to come up with the $2,500, $3,000, whichever it may be, to hook up, but they're gonna have to do it sooner or later. I think we have to be willing and ready to help them with that. So that just needs to be part of the future discussion, is all I ask.
Mr. Bodier has comments.
Jeff?
Councilman Lawler, I think that's certainly absolutely among the things that are workable. I think, too, one of the distinctions that should be made is sometimes when we speak about hookup fees, we're actually talking about new customers in developments.
Yes.
And normally that's rolled into lot fees and things like that. So I think that's a lot of what's thought of as opposed to what a MODAD customer would, charge to hook up. But in any event, I think, a low-income program, a subsidy program is definitely something we're absolutely open to adding to the agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
1 second. One of the things that if this does go through, we will look at rewriting all of the ordinances so that way it all goes in line. It addresses some of the issues with what fees are associated with it, similar to how we've done in previous years with the sewer rates and sewer fees.
Thank you.
No problem.
okay, before I call the question, inside, we have
Excuse
another
us.
question?
We were just
Okay.
kind of having a
In
sidebar.
sidebar with Mr. Dawson, he was asking, did my amended motion, so I probably didn't maybe clarify that, suggest entire elimination of bullet 1 with replacement of what I read, and if it's the pleasure, I can read that again, or just the first 2 sentences of his first bullet, where it talks about approve sending this agreement to the full council with the provision of initiating a contract to bring the design to at least a level that reduces the sensitivity to plus or minus at least 10%. And to understand that, he's got C bullet number 2 under non-construction cost on page 47 of the Ernst & Young report. The parish will pay for the additional design at a reimbursable rate. That would be struck. And then we would add in its place my motion of adding whatever's appropriate by Ernst & Young and Brazil, Soxy, and Wilson's agreement and so forth on our side, additional language to the C&O agreement to protect against overruns within the cost of design and construction of the new construction projects that will be added to the C&O contract, including if costs are below budget, such costs would be invested in the system. And then we would leave, let's see, help me if I got this here, Bill. We would leave the last part of his first bullet he would like to see intact. This work should include a timeline and which has schedules with dependencies that show typical detail of engineering, construction, and operation, and include generally which package plants and which individual treatment plants by area will be connected. Did I get that right, Mr. Dawson? I believe I did. Okay, so I'm fine with that. I don't think we need even though parliamentary procedure would allow an amended motion, but let the record show that's on the table. Would you still second that, Terry?
I do.
Anyway, okay. So I think we, as former president said, clear as punch right now as to what we're doing in this committee, and I'm kind of surprised it's not 11 or 12 o'clock. We do have a couple more items on the agenda, so the chair is going to exercise his discretion and go ahead and call the question. So the question is on the amended motion. It's been moved and seconded by myself and Ms. Casso. Are there any objections? Okay, Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
Yes.
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 No.
Yes. Let the record show by tally, the motion Passes by a 4-1 vote. So, and again, this is a recommendation, so it will be sent to the full council for their disposition at their very next meeting in Gonzales. That'd be November. Terry,
Yes.
whatever the date of that is, next Thursday. Not this coming Thursday, but Thursday a week. All right. No, not quite. We have a few more items this evening. Bear with us. Item number 15 is well, I'm looking in the packet. It says this item has been removed from the agenda. Is that correct? Cover sheet not available?
No, sir, it's still on the agenda.
Okay. Well, Mr. Daniel, proceed.
So the next three items, in fact, are part of the construction and operating agreement. Item 15 was introduced at the last meeting in Donaldsonville, and it basically amends the boundaries of Ascension Consolidated Utility District Number 2 to allow for ownership of properties outside the parish.
Okay, now, the wording here is even a little more tricky than the last one we had a problem with. It says discussion of introduction.
Right, so
So
I
do
was
you
not
want
able,
action?
I was not able to, so the goal was to have everything available and transparent for everybody to see it as quickly as possible. So Councilwoman Casso agreed to put that one on the introduction agenda in Donaldsonville. If anybody wanted to discuss it here, since it didn't come to
I got
committee
it. So it's
first.
already been introduced in Donaldsonville. I remember
Yes.
that now. I got it. Okay.
And, then the idea is if we approve it, then every item to deal with the sewer will be all on the
Got it.
agenda at the same time.
Got it, because that's in the CEA, it's needed. Okay, so does anybody want to discuss this in lieu of the introduction further at this committee level? We dot and i's and cross and t's. Mr. Dawson?
Tell me, how far, is there a limit on how far outside the parish the boundaries can go?
No, sir. The state law allows you to have properties outside of traditional political boundaries,
So you could go all across Livingston Parish, Iberville, and East Baton Rouge?
I'm not sure that you could go up to Washita Parish, sir.
No, I said you could go all the
Right.
way across Livingston, East Baton Rouge, and Iberville. Is that correct? You could go anywhere in those parishes?
There would have to be, well, I don't want to answer for you. It would have to be,
I'm not
Take us to
100% sure
the
exactly
area.
how the state law reads, but my understanding of it is that it allows you to operate properties out, to create a utility district, and to create a utility district that transcends
Is the
political
district,
boundaries.
though, the whole parish? Is it all of those three parishes? Will the district include all of those three parishes?
It will include, once the, I need to stop talking right now, because I'm not 100% sure what the state law says.
Well, I mean, and.
I'm gonna have to
and
get the,
Obviously, the issue with, I mean, we have ACUD, I keep getting them mixed up, one, right,
Right.
Oliver? That's only in part of our parish, ACUD two is in the other part. So, apparently you can draw the lines somewhere besides on the boundaries of the parish.
right, and
And what I'm concerned about is you have this 3% growth. What if they go grow those systems over in those other parishes?
well, then it would inure to the benefit of Ascension Parish, sir.
But we don't necessarily agree on that, and they all discharge into these impaired waterways. But I just I'd like to get a clarification
Well,
on that.
and I will.
If
and
we're
I will-
saying we're setting the boundary, what are we setting them to?
Well, what it does, and I don't have it in front of me, so I apologize, but what it does is it references the state law in the revised ordinance. But I will get it to you with an explanation tomorrow.
Okay.
Apologize for not having it.
and let me just add, we certainly will need that when we actually have a discussion, since it's been introduced at the very next
Absolutely,
council
but
meeting.
I meant to have it, to be able to explain it today, and I failed in that regard.
Okay. Item number 16 is a resolution to adjust the utility rates for ACUD. Number 2, Mr. Daly.
Okay, so we're required to vote on the utility rates. So what this does is, what this resolution does is it matches the utility rates in the construction and operating agreement, starting at 57.90 and escalating at 4%.
Mr. Dawson.
Okay. I don't think you can do that on a resolution.
So according
I mean, if
to,
you look at our charter, it says, set fees, rates.
So
That
according
takes
to-
an ordinance.
so in the utility districts, we set rates by resolution.
That takes precedence over our charter?
According to the parish attorneys.
Well, we're gonna have to get some clarification on that.
And I can just say that all previous rates were set by resolution
Yeah, I
as well.
wonder about that, because we had an ordinance, and it referenced a resolution, which,
Well,
I wonder about that.
Mr. Parent is not here tonight, so we'll be spinning our wheels on this issue. Is this something we'd
Well,
want?
I'd like to get an answer to it.
Well, we can get an answer, but,
Right. But
Not tonight.
Not tonight.
not
right.
tonight.
Tonight.
I have a question.
But I'm just relying on the parish attorney's advice.
And we have set them, you said, in the past by resolution.
Yes, sir. And we set the utility, we set the sewer fees for ACUD number 1 by resolution as well.
Yeah, to be honest, I see Mr. Dawson's point, because resolutions just says that we strongly recommend, something happen versus an ordinance is law.
Right, well, I investigated all the rate increases.
I got you.
In the consolidated utility districts, they were all set by resolution.
But they had an ordinance and it referenced a resolution. I question that. I mean, if you like, I can.
And I went to the
read you
parish
out of the
attorney and
charter.
I asked him for an opinion and he said, set it by resolution, so.
I heard that before.
Hopefully with the new group that comes in, we'll have legal counsel at all meetings. Because it's hard to, what's a good word, legislate anything when we sometimes, I never want to agree to something that's not, this is OJ's favorite, although he's leaving too. Is everything that we're about to do legal? How many times have you said that?
Twice, I think.
I mean, let's go home, doctor.
Well, we have one more item.
Got a
Well,
question
we need
at
to,
the end.
this
Miss-
needs to be advanced to the full council and we can resolve the
Well, that-
issue
that
there.
was- is that what
Well,
you
I
said?
make the motion
Put it
and
on the
move
consent agenda.
with
Don't
legal
put it in
counsel, before legal counsel, with legal counsel to answer question. That's all.
Do I have a second to that?
Yes.
Yes.
We're going to give the second to Ms. Casso.
And
Ms.
I have a
Casso,
question.
discussion?
Yes, I just have a question. It would seem to me that ACUD number 1 and ACUD number 2, functioning as districts, should function somewhat like our drainage board. They should sit separately from the council.
And in fact, the composition of the district is supposed to be appointed by the council. In the past,
So we disobeyed that.
in the past, it's just operated as the full council was the district, but it does say that you're supposed to appoint members to the district.
Can I answer?
Yes, you may. Mr. Joseph?
ACUD one was created on the West Bank as a independent board. They had a tax, and then the board lost, did some misfinancing. The parish took it over and put it under the utility district. But they still have an advisory board because of that tax. ACUD number 2 was always created as a parish council board because at the time, they had numerous water board, numerous utility committed board. And what they did was just consolidated all of them as one and let the council represent those areas
If
based on that.
If I'm not
That makes sense.
mistaken, Councilman, there is language in Ascension Consolidated Utility District Number 2 that requires appointing of board members. Now, you can appoint the entire council, but it is a separate and distinct political subdivision. So it operates, and, you know, it has all the powers of the parish to file lawsuits, borrow money, et cetera, et cetera.
And I think that boundary was like Hueyville, Darrell, on that that river region area right there.
So would you research that for us?
I will.
And be prepared to make a recommendation on
I
that?
will. I'll get the parish attorneys, and then I'll go and get our Brazil Saxy attorney's recommendation as well.
So I think we still need to act on this, chairs.
Okay, Doc?
That's not in my copy.
Doc,
Well, we'll work with this. Oh, yeah.
Doc, approve
Uh,
that.
Number 17, Mr. Daniel, we added to the agenda. This is the contribution and conveyance agreement and act of transfer of property by between.
We had to act on 16 to move it forward with the council. We had a motion that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Based on pending of legal.
I was having a sidebar with Mr. Dawson,
We have a
so
motion and a second on it.
on the table is a motion and a second. No further discussion. Any objections? Hearing none, the motion relative to item 16 is approved. Item 17 is what I just read moments ago. Mr. Daniel.
So this is the contribution and conveyance agreement between Ascension Wastewater and Ascension Consolidated Utility District Number 2. And basically, it's just a listing of the assets that we're going to transfer in and that they're going to transfer in. And that's part of it's referenced in the operating and construction agreement. So I'd like to advance it to the council as well.
So moved.
Second.
We move in second to advance it to the council. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, that motion passes. Motion to adjourn by Mr. Joseph, second by
Okay,
Mr. Dawson.
I'm going to Mexico.
We are adjourned.
Just a few hours, so.